Hello. What a screw up. My internet went to hell and I'll have to reshare a new link now. So many people had joined. Hello. Thanks guys for coming back. So let's start history of Indian philosophy. We will check it out from Government of India's Culture Ministry's website. Look at how beautiful this book is. So I'll have to give a basic background of the book again because I'm going to delete the previous stream. So I hope the audio is coming fine. We are going to discuss Surendranath Dasgupta, a legendary Bengali Sanskrit scholar who did his research in Cambridge, did a PhD from there, wrote this seminal work, a 5-volume masterpiece called A History of Indian Philosophy. This book looks really nice and zooms in really nice on a government website. Is everything working fine? Let's start. Hey, does anyone listen to rap here? Yes, I do. So all are back. Hit the like button, folks. Yes, Shravya, thank you. So, reading that intro paragraph again, the first paragraph that he starts with, a beautiful sentence construction. I don't know if it's in Sanskrit. May he who links the minds of all people through the apertures of time with new threads of knowledge like a garland of flowers be pleased to accept this my thread of Eastern thought, offered though it be small, with the greatest devotion. This is absolute beautiful writing. Okay, one Kannada person had joined and he was saying that in volume 4, Surendranath Dasgupta has said that that Purandara Dasa is the pinnacle of Eastern philosophical thought. That is unbelievable. Is that guy back here? Is that person back here? I hope he is. If that is true, that's unbelievable. Insane. Whoever was that Kannada person, please show yourself again and let us know how you found this. And have you read this book before, or did you just Google it right now and found it? This is amazing. The live is working fine now, right? Okay. This is dedicated to the work and ambition of a lifetime is herein humbly dedicated with supreme reverence to the great sages of India who for the first time in history formulated the true principles of freedom and devoted themselves to the holy quest of truth and final assessment and discovery of the ultimate spiritual essence of man through their concrete lives, critical thought, dominant will and self-denial. So this is the first and last day we are reading from here because Abhinag has donated enough money to buy this book and I'm going to order it ASAP, and then I'll get to underline things and hold this in my hand because that's important. He's going to say some phenomenal things. And guys, concentrate a lot because philosophy is pretty tough to think about, right? And especially from a live stream on YouTube, it's going to be hard. We are going to have to do a lot of thinking. And what I said in the previous stream as well, notice how enlightenment era sort of thing it sounds, freedom and critical thought. Liberals think this is their domain. Liberals think that 1800s 1700s में जो modernity आया, enlightenment era आया, renaissance era आया, उसी से ये सब शुरू हुआ, or 1400s 1500s etc. The medieval 1600s, those times, that's when these thoughts were first coming to light according to liberals. But see how Surendranath Dasgupta, who has written 5 volumes of history of Indian philosophy, seems to think that it's all in Indian philosophy itself. You need to turn your video off, otherwise it will keep sticking. It's happening again. What the hell? What do you mean? Is the audio coming fine, but the video is getting stuck? Let me know what's up. What do you mean video band kar? Note on the pronunciation of transliterated Sanskrit words. The vowels are pronounced almost in the same way as in Italian, except that the sound of A approaches that of O in bond or U in but, and A that of A as in army. The consonants are as in English, except C is ch in church. TDN are cerebrals, to which English TDN almost correspond. TDN are pure dentals. But he used to make streams like this earlier also, and everything was fine. Then God knows why it's buffering so much today. What's going on? I don't know, something might be up with my Wi-Fi. Yeah, slow internet today. Is the audio coming fine? Can you hear my full sentences? आज क्या सब टेक्निकल अजीब चीज़ें हो रहा है. ऑलरेडी हाफ एन आवर हो गया. So the pronunciations are noted first here. Oh, even the audio is stuck. Wait. Well, I don't know what's going on today. Okay, Shravya is saying the audio is fine. Stream is buffering both audio and video. If you turn off your video once, it may work. How do we turn off the video? I can't understand that. What do you mean turn off the video and then just leave the audio on? How does that work? What will you see then? It's still buffering, right? Where is the problem coming from? Is it the problem with my OBS? Yeah, I just restarted my camera and stuff. Yeah, I tried with camera off. Something seems to be wrong with my computer only. Everything is pretty slow. Is it still buffering? Audio is not fine. Nope, even audio is having issues. What's going on? Something's wrong. StreamYard, I've been thinking. I'll do it when some next set of monetization comes in. I was thinking then. But this is not a StreamYard problem. This is happening from my computer only. Something's wrong with my computer. Is it fine now? No, it's still buffering, right? Yeah, I turned off the camera. It's still not working. Now it's fine. You can see my page. Okay, Abhi is saying to continue. Can you hear my voice? You can't see the the page turning though, right? Only the video is completely frozen. What's going on? So Tattva Bodhaka is saying that yes, Dasgupta ji had quoted about Vyasatirtha. Since Chandrachura was being discussed here, I gave the small link which existed. I see. Interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. Can you all hear my voice and video, etc. now? Yeah, I turned off the camera. Okay, there was a huge delay, man. Man, what a time waste. Sorry, guys. Niranjan. Okay. So the preface. The old civilization of India was a concrete unity. This is the preface, okay? The old civilization of India was a concrete unity of many-sided developments in art, architecture, literature, religion, morals, and science, so far as it was understood in those days. This is an important line actually, that so far as it was understood in those days, in that sense. When he says science, he does not mean that we invented atom bombs. But the most important achievement of Indian thought was philosophy. It was regarded as the goal of all the highest practical and theoretical activities, and it indicated the point of unity amidst all the apparent diversities which the complex growth of culture over a vast area inhabited by different peoples produced. What a beautiful way of thinking. There is some unity, the unity amidst all the apparent diversities which the complex growth of culture occurred. It is not in the history of foreign invasions or in the rise of independent kingdoms at different times in the empires of this or that great monarch that the unity of India is to be sought. My God, this is such an important sentence, guys. We are getting into very important territory here. It is not in the history of foreign invasions or in the rise of independent kingdoms at different times in the empires of this or that great monarch that the unity of India is to be sought. It is essentially one of spiritual aspirations and obedience to the law of the spirit, which were regarded as superior to everything else. It is essentially one of spiritual aspirations and obedience to the law of spirit, which were regarded as superior to everything else. And it has outlived all the political changes through which India has passed. The Greeks, the Huns, the Scythians, the Pathans and the Mughals, who occupied the land and controlled the political machinery, never ruled the minds of the people. Because these political events were like hurricanes or the changes of season, mere phenomena of a natural or physical order, which never affected the spiritual integrity of Hindu culture. If after a passivity of some centuries, India is again going to become creative, it is mainly on account of this fundamental unity of her progress. Fundamental unity of her progress and civilization, and not for anything that she may borrow from other countries. It is going to be because of the fundamental unity of her progress and civilization. It is therefore indispensably necessary for all those who wish to appreciate the significance and potentialities of Indian culture that they should properly understand the history of Indian philosophy, Indian philosophical thought, which is the nucleus round which all that is best and highest in India has grown. Much harm has already been done by the circulation of opinions that the culture and philosophy of India was dreamy and abstract. It is therefore very necessary that Indians as well as other peoples should become more and more acquainted with the true characteristics of the past history of Indian thought and form a correct estimate of its special features. Okay, let's checking some comments. We can hear your beautiful voice, Dada. Yeah, this is unfortunate. This it sounds like an audiobook. I wanted it to be at least my face. Okay. Shravya Tattvavodaka, for whom the quotation was actually talking about Nanaga Kannada. Okay, they are speaking amongst themselves. But it is not only for the sake of the right understanding. But it is not only for the sake of right understanding. Oh, wait. I'm learning how to use this book. But it is not only for the sake of the right understanding of India that Indian philosophy should be read, or only as a record of the past thoughts of India. Actually, this is pretty interesting and actually important. I've been thinking about this for the last few days, that why are we reading these things? Why are we reading all the history? Why are we reading the Vedas and Brahma Puran, which might not have direct day-to-day applications in our lives today in 2023, right? Why is that? Just because we want to find out what cool things were written in the past? Is it just that? Or should we find out how is it relevant in our lives today as well? Maybe it makes us more wise. Wisdom is all I'm thinking when I'm thinking about reading Indian philosophy and Indian history, Indian even religious texts, so to speak. So for most of the problems that are still debated in modern philosophical thought occurred in more or less divergent forms to the philosophers of India. Their discussions, difficulties and solutions, when properly grasped in connection with the problems of our own times, may throw light on the course of the process of the future reconstruction of modern thought. The discovery of the important features of Indian philosophical thought and a due appreciation of their full significance may turn out to be as important to modern philosophy as the discovery of Sanskrit has been to the investigation of modern philosophical searches. It is unfortunate that the task of reinterpretation and revaluation of Indian thought has not yet been undertaken on a comprehensive scale. Sanskritists also, with very few exceptions, have neglected this important field of study, for most of these scholars have been interested more in mythology, philology and history than in philosophy. Much work, however, has already been done in the way of the publication of a large number of important texts, and translations of some of them have also been attempted, but owing to the presence of many technical terms in advanced Sanskrit philosophical literature, the translations in most cases are hardly intelligible to those who are not familiar with the texts themselves. This is such important. I have no idea. I can't explain how important this point is. What you will notice by when you read translated works of Rig Veda, etc., by British people, Western people, and even some Indian translations of the earlier Arthashastras, the first translation, the second translations, those translations are semi-unintelligible. You won't be able to understand one sentence from those translations, okay? The sentences are absolutely weirdly constructed. They just translated every word that came in Sanskrit and formed the English sentence in that way only. Like that sentence that I am become death. When the hell would you ever say I am become death? So it's those kind of things. It has to be intelligible, which is why Arthashastra was translated a third time. And I think Bibek Debroy does a fine job of translation because of that. Yeah, Tattva Bodhaka is saying never ruled over the minds. Profound. The physical is different from the mental, emotional and the spiritual. Yes. And that's why Tattva Bodhaka, there's this concept in Rig Veda that Shukshma, oh my god, I forgot. Sthula, Shukshma and Karan. Spirit, body, mind. I've come to understand it's something like that. Yes, I heard somewhere that India geographical unity was determined by pilgrims. Abhay, yeah, this is the legendary book by Wendy Doniger or who's that historian who called Jesai Deepak to debate hijab with Dr. Faizan Mustafa. That historian wrote the book Sacred Geography of India and then delayed the publishing of the book because she thought that Indian right-wingers will get help from it. That's why she delayed her own book, even though right-wingers agree with her point. That's exactly the point that we are making, that it's a sacred geography, but she but she thinks that's an evil thing to be used in politics. Okay. So if in most Sanskrit philosophical literature, the translation in most cases are hardly intelligible to those who are not familiar with the texts themselves. A work containing some general account of the mutual relations of the chief systems is necessary for those who intend to pursue the study of a particular school. This is also necessary for lay readers interested in philosophy, like we are. We are lay readers interested in philosophy and students of Western philosophy who have no inclination or time to specialize in any Indian system. Yeah, this is after all a gist. This is 5 volumes discussing entirety of India's philosophical literature. Otherwise, we would have to read. We actually someday will have to read basically hundreds of books on Indian philosophy if we want to get the full spectrum of thought. Okay. This is also necessary for in my 2 books, the study of Patanjali and yoga philosophy in relation to other Indian systems of thought. I have attempted to interpret the Shankho and yoga systems both from their inner point of view and from the point of view of their relation to other Indian systems. Yeah, Rishi Aurobindo was very interested and obsessed with this. The present attempt deals with the important features of these. The present attempt meaning this particular book. This particular book deals with the important features of these Samkhya Yoga, as also of all the other systems, and seek to show some of their inner philosophical relations, especially in regard to the history of their development. I have tried to be as faithful to the original texts as I could, and have always given the Sanskrit or Pali technical terms for the help of those who want to make this book a guide to further study. To understand something of these terms is indeed essential for anyone who wishes to be sure that he is following the actual course of the thoughts. In Sanskrit treatises, the style of argument and methods of treating the different topics are altogether different from what we find in any modern work of philosophy. Yeah, the way we actually paragraph construction, sentence construction, thought process, everything was different in Sanskrit. That's why translations either suck or are extremely difficult to do them well. Interesting comments coming here. Talking about subjugation, the temporary period of so-called subjugation that Bharata went through due to Middle Eastern and European colonialists is minuscule. This period is so minuscule compared to the eternality of this holy land Bharata and its civilization Sanatana. I've used the phrase so-called subjugation or loss because physical resources were captured, but the idea of civilization could not be captured and erased from the minds of the Bharatiya. Yeah. But the physical goes on to influence the mental, emotional and spiritual, that we mustn't demote the physical. Hungry man will only think of which that will solve his need. But it was the hungrier men who have kept Hindu civilization alive, not the rich who went to Cambridge and became Nehruvians, right? Surendranath Dasgupta is an exception. The idea remains due to which it finds, this is the comment section, the idea remains due to which it finds manifestation in different forms, making both eternal. This abstract idea is the reason everyone, irrespective of where they were from in Bharata, could feel Kantara. Yes, that is absolutely true. The entire time while watching Kantara, I could not, it never struck me as a distant Kannada production that the language I don't know. It didn't feel like that. It felt like it's just something going around, going on in like just around me in my locality. It does not feel distant culturally. Okay, going on with the book. Materials had therefore to be collected from a large number of works on each system, and these have been knit together and given a shape which is likely to be more intelligible, more understandable to people unacquainted with Sanskritic ways of thought, which means this book is made for us. We are going to be absolutely having fun with this book. More intelligible to people unacquainted with Sanskritic ways of thought. That's an important phrase though, right? Sanskritic ways of thought. But at the same time, I considered it quite undesirable to put any pressure on Indian thoughts in order to make them appear as European. Man, what a genius this guy is. I considered it quite undesirable, which means I did not want to put any pressure on Indian thoughts in order to make them appear as European. This will explain much of what might appear quaint to a European reader. But while keeping all the thoughts and expressions of the Indian thinkers, I have tried to arrange them in a systematic whole in a manner which appeared to me strictly faithful to their clear indications and suggestions. It is only in very few places that I have translated some of the Indian terms by terms of English philosophy. तो इंग्लिश फिलोसफी में जो टेक्निकल टर्म्स है उससे बहुत कम जगह में ही वो वर्ड को ही यूज़ कर दिया है संस्कृत वाले टेक्निकल टर्म्स को ट्रांसलेट करने के लिए, बट मोस्टली नॉट. And this I did because it appeared to me that those were approximately the nearest approach to the Indian sense of the term. In all other places, I have tried to choose words which have not been made dangerous by the acquirement of technical senses. This, however, is difficult because the words which are used in philosophy always acquire some sort of technical sense. I would therefore request my readers to take those words in an unsophisticated sense and associate them with such meanings as are justified by the passages and contexts in which they are used. Some of what will appear as obscure in any system may, I hope, be removed if it is reread with care and attention. For unfamiliarity sometimes, because unfamiliarity sometimes stands in the way of right comprehension, right? But I may also have missed giving the proper suggestive links in many places where condensation was inevitable, and the systems themselves have also sometimes insoluble difficulties, because no system of philosophy is without its dark and uncomfortable corners. Though I have, okay, let's read some comments again. What about the history of Indian martial arts? If you can recommend some paper or article, then we'll discuss it. I would like to know more about some research on Indian martial arts. Tattva Bodhaka is saying it is like holding the map of Bharata and assuming to have captured Bharata. Bharata lies in the minds, hearts and souls of its people, and even if it is alive in one of them, then it is enough to restore the feeling in all. From time to time, there appeared real heroes who did this, an abstract form of unity that can only be experienced. Okay, if is saying global martial arts is the history of Indian martial arts. If you remember, Bodhidharma was a Tamil Brahmin Buddhist who went to China to teach, then from there to Japan and onwards. Actually, India, as far as I know about martial arts, see, Greece is famous for wrestling, right? Even though they don't wrestle anymore. Notice how India, which was a contemporary of Greek civilization, the ancient Hindu civilization, there even wrestling was the main martial art. Kings used to practice them, and soldiers used to practice them. Kushti was the first thing that they would do. Kushti was the main lung endurance developer, everyday basic workout के लिए. And उसके अलावा तो तलवार वलवार practice करना ही है. But see how Haryana, mysteriously, Haryana, where Sapta Sindhu civilization happened, Haryana still is the bastion for wrestling, even though Greece is not. Okay? Our one state, Haryana, produces wrestlers that take on gigantic wrestling countries like Russia and USA. हमारा देश का एक state Russia, USA पे भारी पड़ता है. And we have continued our wrestling because it's our civilizational memory, because our minds did not get captured like Tattva Bodhaka is saying here. But Greece got absolutely screwed, and therefore they lost all their thought, all their cultures, and even their wrestling. आज के ग्रीस में कहाँ है उन दिनों के ग्रीस के कुछ थॉट या डेली लाइफस्टाइल. हमारे में अभी भी हम ओम भूर्भुवः स्वः कितने करोड़ों लोग आज भी सुबह को बोलते हैं, प्रार्थना करते हैं. रेसलिंग होता है हरियाणा में आज भी. Bro, stop calling it Middle East. They are not Middle East for us. Call it West Asia. We must firmly stand on our soil and look out. Yeah, actually we need to say this consciously, or we can call it simply Middle West. But yes, if actually what is West and East, all that is twisted, right? Because if you just flip the oceans, which we consider the center of the earth. That is decolonial scholars what they have done basically, though. Actually, Walter D. Mignolo writes it in his book. He had, when decoloniality did not have a name, the early scholars of decoloniality, this is how they approached things. They just flipped everything. Some guy drew a map in a university in France, putting Asia on the left and North America and South America on the right, and that's how West and East got defined. So it's all these terms are from their perspective. As Rajiv Malhotra talked about Sanskrit non-translatables, yes, absolutely. The elites in academia do not bring such authors and books into the limelight. Now we know why. Bengalis of their day were unapologetic cultural civilizational nationalists who never minced words. Tattva is absolutely right, and people will shiver. Leftists will shiver at the things Aurobindo Ghosh has said about our Middle Eastern friends. Oh, I just said Middle Eastern again. Okay. Anyway, though I have begun my work, we are getting back to the book now. Is without its dark and okay. For anyone who's joining now, I'm doing this without a camera today because there's something wrong with my internet, and if I'm putting the camera on, then it's going to hell. So the book says now, Surendranath Dasgupta writes, though I have begun my work from the Vedic and Brahmanic stage, my treatment of this period has been very slight. The beginnings of the evolution of philosophical thought, though they can be traced in the later Vedic hymns, are neither connected nor systematic. More is found in the Brahmanas, but I do not think it worthwhile to elaborate the broken shreds of thought of this epoch. I could have dealt with the Upanishad period more fully, but many works on the subject have already been published in Europe, and those who wish to go into details will certainly go to them. Okay, someday we will have to do that as well. I have therefore limited myself to the dominant current flowing through the earlier Upanishads. Nice. Notices of other currents of thought will be given in connection with the treatment of other systems in the second volume, with which they are more intimately connected. It will be noticed that my treatment of early Buddhism is in some places of an inconclusive character. This is largely due to the inconclusive character of the texts which were put into writing long after Buddha in the form of dialogues, and where the precision and directness required in philosophy were not contemplated. This has given rise to a number of theories about the interpretations of the philosophical problems of early Buddhism among modern Buddhist scholars, and it is not always easy to decide one way or the other without running the risk of being dogmatic. Of course, you will have to be dogmatic. And the scope of my work was also too limited to allow me to indulge in very elaborate discussions of textual difficulties. But still, I also have in many places formed theories of my own. Whether they are right or wrong, it will be for scholars to judge. I had no space for entering into any polemic, but it will be found that my interpretations of the systems are different in some cases from those offered by some European scholars who have worked on them, and I leave it to those who are acquainted with the literature of the subject to decide which of us may be in the right. And of course, we are not qualified enough to judge this for now, but I am inclined to think that a native born with who actually is a scholar of Sanskrit might know this better. I have not dealt elaborately with the new school of logic, Navya Nyaya of Bengal, for the simple reason that most of the contributions of this school consist in the invention of technical expressions and the emphasis put on the necessity of strict exactitude and absolute preciseness of logical definitions and discussions, and these are almost untranslatable in intelligible English. I have, however, incorporated what important differences of philosophical points of view I could find in it. Discussions of purely technical character could not be very fruitful in a work like this. Yeah, because this is kind of like popular philosophy. He's doing it for the layperson. The bibliography given of the different Indian systems in the last 6 chapters is not exhaustive, but consists mostly of books which have been actually studied or consulted in the writing of those chapters. Exact references to the pages of the texts have generally been given in footnotes, where a difference of interpretation was anticipated, or where it was felt that a reference to the text would make the matter clearer, or where the opinions of modern writers have been incorporated. Okay, let's check some comments again. Very true. That reminds me of the whole fiasco around Kanyadan. People who did not understand what dana meant went on ranting. There are verbs in Sanskrit with an elevated purpose, right? Anyone buying his 10 heads of Ravana? The chapter headings were pretty interesting. Shravya, whose book is this? Raju Malhotra. Okay, Ifin is saying translation, but there are many ones I've said is based on their etymology. Wait, I did not read your earlier comments. Mr. Malhotra is important for us, but some things he got wrong, like Swarga is indeed heaven, Itihasa is history, and God is Devta, not Bhagwan or Ishwar. Yes, he's right. He's right. There is no direct one-to-one translation. Yes, we also had wrestling. Look at Mahabharata and other Purans. It is literally called Malla Yuddha. Yes, we had wrestling, and remember there is a king, right, in Mahabharata, whose name is Yuyutsu. And what does Y translate? Y also pronounced as J. Jiu-jitsu was essentially as a concept, as a martial art, not in its current form. Jiu-jitsu was born in India, according to me, because Jiu-jitsu is very close to wrestling. Both come under the concept called grappling in a martial art. Okay, like kickboxing, boxing, Muay Thai. These are called striking arts. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu, these are called grappling arts, because you grapple, you hold someone, control their body, manipulate their body according to your will, you force them to your will. That's called grappling. Wrestling and jiu-jitsu is the lines are very, very blurry, and we have a guy in Mahabharata called jiu-jitsu. What more evidence do we need? And then jiu-jitsu went to Japan. From there it went to Brazil, and now we have Brazilian jiu-jitsu in its most evolved and most intelligent form manifestation. Okay, Tattva Bodhaka is saying approaching the Vedic corpus in light of Vedanta is a Herculean task. Yes, I say this because there have been classical commentaries on the Vedas like that of Sayanacharya, but they only dealt with the literal. Yeah, the Vedas deserve to be viewed with a spiritual, adhyatmika lens as well. Right. It gives me the greatest pleasure. I'm going back to the book now. It gives me the greatest pleasure to acknowledge my deepest gratefulness to the Honorable Maharaja Sir Manindra Chandra Nondi, KCIE, Kashim Bazar, Bengal, who has kindly promised to bear the entire expense of the publication of both volumes of the present work. Look at this. A king who has lost his kingdom is sponsoring this project with his own money, and we are supposed to think that kings were only bad and evil, or that monarchy is inherently bad. The name of this noble man is almost a household word in Bengal for the magnanimous gifts that he has made to educational and other causes. Up till now, he has made a total gift of about 3 lakh pounds in 1951. 3 lakh pounds, of which those devoted to education come to about 2 lakh pounds. Who the hell is this guy? Honorable Maharaja Sir Manindra Chandra Nondi. I have never heard of him. Where the hell is Kashim Bazar? I don't even know that. Kashim Bazar is in Bangladesh, right? Yeah, it's probably named after Mir Kashim. But the man himself is far above the gifts he has made. His sterling character, universal sympathy and friendship, his kindness and amiability make him a veritable bodhisattva, one of the noblest of men that I have ever seen. Like many other scholars of Bengal, I am deeply indebted to him for the encouragement that he has given me in the pursuit of my studies and researches, and my feelings of attachment and gratefulness for him are too deep for utterance. Okay, if you guys are getting bored with the preface, let me know. Okay, otherwise I would like to read the entire preface to see exactly who he wants to give credit for encouraging him in this project. Navya Nyaya is highly polemical in nature. Still, no one is interested. One can refer to a book on the Nyaya Maxims compilation. We'll try to post a link. Who is it by? Tattva Bodhaka? Tattva Bodhaka, are you older than me? I'll address to you that way then. I kind of get the vibe that everyone is my age or a little younger than me. Okay. I am much indebted to my... Okay, I'm getting back to the book now. I am much indebted to my esteemed friends, Dr. E.J. Thomas of the Cambridge University Library and Mr. Douglas Ainzel for their kindly revising the proofs of this work. To the former, I am also indebted for his attention to the transliteration of a large number of Sanskrit words. He assisted me with his advice on many points of detail, in particular the exposition of the Buddhist doctrine of the cause of rebirth, owes something of its treatment to repeated discussions with him. I also wish to express my gratefulness to my friend Mr. N.K. Siddhanta, M.A., late of the Scottish Churches College, and Mademoiselle Paul Povey for the kind assistance they have rendered in preparing the index. My obligations are also due to the syndics of the Cambridge University Press, to scholars of Indian philosophy who may do me the honor of reading my book and who may be impressed with its... Okay, we are done with the preface. With its inevitable shortcomings and defects, I can only pray in the words of Hemachandra. Okay, I am not going to spend time trying to read that. It will take 5 minutes. Let's see. Pramana Siddhanta Viruddham Atra Yatkichi Duktam Mati Mandya Dosat Matsariyam Utsariya Tadariya Chitta Prasada Madhaya Visodhyantu. Trinity College, Cambridge. Okay, he is starting writing this book in 1922. Okay, finally this version was, I guess, published in 1951. That's why. So first chapter, the Vedas, Brahmans and their philosophy. Okay, uske pehle introduction bhi hai. Yeah, did I just see something about Purandara Dasa? No, that was written Purusha. Okay. Chapter 1, introductory. Okay, great discussion going on in the comment section. Should I try once to get the camera back? I think I know what the problem was now. Anyway, I don't want to risk it. बहुत time waste हो गया आज शुरू में. Chapter 1, introductory. The achievements of the ancient Indians in the field of philosophy are but very imperfectly known to the world at large, and it is unfortunate that the condition is no better even in India. There is a small body of Hindu scholars and ascetics living a retired life in solitude who are well acquainted with the subject, but they do not know English and are not used to modern ways of thinking, and the idea that they ought to write books in vernaculars in order to popularize the subject does not appeal to them. उन लोगों को लगता है कि हाँ हमको तो समझ में आ गया, अब हम बाई वर्बली हम लोगों को बोलते फिरेंगे, उससे कुछ किसी को समझना है तो समझे. Through the activity of various learned bodies and private individuals, both in Europe and in India, large numbers of philosophical works in Sanskrit and Pali have been published, as well as translations of a few of them, but there has been as yet little systematic attempt on the part of scholars to study them and judge their value. There are hundreds of Sanskrit works on most of the systems of Indian thought, and scarcely 100th part of them has been translated. Indian modes of expression, entailing difficult technical philosophical terms, are so different from those of European thought that they can hardly ever be accurately translated. It is therefore very difficult for a person unacquainted with Sanskrit to understand Indian philosophical thought in its true bearing from translations. Pali is a much easier language than Sanskrit, but a knowledge of Pali is helpful in understanding only the easiest school of Buddhism when it was in its semi-philosophical stage. Okay, by the way, Pali se yaad aaya. In Pali, there's a Buddhist book called Digha Nikaya. So Digha means long, okay. And that gives me the idea that Digha, which is the most famous beach tourist spot in West Bengal, is probably a Pali word. It means Dirgha. Dirgha meaning long, since Digha beach is pretty long. And those regions were pretty Buddhist. Even Digha is pretty close to Tamralipti, that is, from where Fahian left for Sri Lanka, Thailand, etc. So I think Digha is a Pali name. I'm saying this to Bengalis. I'm most probably younger than you, Anna, 25. Arey bhai, just 25, nice. Well, the Vedas are literally called, this is a comment section, well, the Vedas are literally called Apaurushaya. Other than Arya Samaj, I can't think of any Shakta of Dharma that thinks of the Vedas as an Abrahamic revelation. Yes. Yeah, actually, Mimamshaks think it's not Apaurushaya. They think it's Paurushaya. Okay. So Sanskrit is Pali when it was in its semi-philosophical stage. Sanskrit is generally regarded as a difficult language, but no one from an acquaintance with Vedic or ordinary literary Sanskrit can have any idea of the difficulty of the logical and abstruse parts of Sanskrit philosophical literature. A man who can easily understand the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Puranas, the law books, and that means Nyaya Shastra and Dharma Shastra, the Puranas, the law books and the literary works, and is also well acquainted with European philosophical thought, may find it literally impossible to understand even small portions of a work of advanced Indian logic or the dialectical Vedanta. Okay, we have to read this sentence once again. This was very, very interesting. He's saying a man who can easily understand the Vedas, Upanishads, the Puranas, law books, and the literary works, and is also well acquainted with European philosophical thought. Even such a person may find it literally impossible to understand even small portions of a work of advanced Indian logic or the dialectical Vedanta. What the hell? This is due to two reasons: the use of technical terms and of great condensation in expression, and the hidden allusions to doctrines of other systems. They have produced real systems of thought, and the speculations of only a few can be said to have had a history. Many do not rise beyond the mythological stage. Yes. Even the theories of Oriental peoples, the Hindus, Egyptians, Chinese, consist in the main of mythological and ethical doctrines, and are not thoroughgoing systems of thought. They are that word is destroyed. They are shown through with poesy and faith. They are shot through with poesy and faith. We shall therefore limit ourselves to the study of the Western countries and begin with the philosophy of the ancient Greeks, on whose culture our own civilization in part rests. There are doubtless many other people who hold such uninformed and untrue beliefs. Okay, he's criticizing this. This was a quote from someone. Someone has said that whose culture our Greek civilization is on whose culture our own civilization in part rests. There are doubtless many other people who hold such uninformed and untrue beliefs, which only show their ignorance of uninformed matters. Yeah, I skipped a page. That's what I was thinking. This is hilarious. The tendency to conceiving philosophical problems in a clear and unambiguous manner is an important feature of Sanskrit thought. But from the 9th century onwards, the habit of using clear, definite, and precise expressions began to develop in a very striking manner, and as a result of that, a large number of technical terms began to be invented. These terms are seldom properly explained, and it is presupposed that the reader who wants to read the works should have a knowledge of them. Anyone in olden times who took to the study of any system of philosophy had to do so with a teacher, of course with a guru, who explained those terms to him. The teacher himself had got it from his teacher and he from his. There was no tendency to popularize philosophy, because the idea then prevalent was that only the chosen few who had otherwise shown their fitness deserved to become fit students, adhikari, of philosophy under the direction of a teacher. Yes, because the people who have become Vidya Janma, who have become Dvija, who have had their Upanayana Samskara and become officially in the Brahmin caste, they deserve to further study philosophy, because this is advanced. This is like someone asking for a course in MA or PhD, even though and for that they need to do their graduation first. Only those who had the grit and high moral strength to devote their this sentence is a bit open to misinterpretation. It was only for the chosen few. Yes, everything is for the chosen few. Okay. Because PhD is not going to be given to a 5-year-old kid. It's for the chosen few. MA courses are for a chosen few. Graduation courses are for a chosen few. The chosen few means competence and merit. People were chosen, those few were chosen on the basis of merit and competence. Only those who had the grit and high moral strength to devote their whole life to the true understanding of philosophy and the rebuilding of life in accordance with the high truths of philosophy. What a beautiful sentence. Rebuilding of life in accordance with the high truths of philosophy were allowed to study it. Okay, this is okay. Interesting comment section going on. Afin is saying, if I'm not wrong, Mimamsha says that because they believe it comes out of the brains or of humans, that is why Purusha. But by Apurusha I meant that which deals with more than the material reality. Yes, Sanskrit literally means the purest. Yeah, jiska sanskaran hua hai. So Dev Bhasha indeed. Yeah. So Efin, did you check out my Bengali Rigbed videos on Beder Pramanno and Beder Apurushatto? Check those out. What you are talking about is answered exactly that, and that part is written by the translator, original Bengali translator who translated the Vedas in Bengali in the 1800s, late 1800s. Okay. Another difficulty which a beginner will meet is this. So we are beginners. Let's see. Will meet is this, that sometimes the same technical terms are used in extremely different senses in different systems. The student must know the meaning of each technical term with reference to the system in which it occurs, and no dictionary will enlighten him much about the matter. He's just basically ranting here that how much difficulty he had to go through for translating this book. He's sharing his pain with us. He will have to pick them up, the beginner, he will have to pick them up as he advances and finds them used. Allusions to that is, references to the doctrines of other systems and their refutations during the discussions of similar doctrines in any particular system of thought are often very puzzling even to a well-equipped reader, because he cannot be expected to know all the doctrines of other systems without going through them, and so it often becomes difficult to follow the series of answers and refutations which are poured forth in the course of these discussions. There are two important compendiums in Sanskrit giving a summary of thought. There are two important compendiums in Sanskrit giving a summary of some of the principal systems of Indian thought, vis-a-vis the Sarva Darsana Samgraha and the Saddha Rasana Samuchaya of Haribhadra, with the commentary of Gunaratna. But the former is very sketchy and can throw very little light on the understanding of the ontological or epistemological doctrines of any of the systems. Okay, it has been translated by Cowell and Go, but I am afraid the translation may not be found very intelligible. Yes, that's what I've seen in almost all translations done by Westerners of Sanskrit texts. The sentence construction does not make any sense. Gunaratna's commentary is excellent so far as Jainism is concerned, and it sometimes gives interesting information about other systems and also supplies us with some short bibliographical notices, but it seldom goes on to explain the epistemological or ontological doctrines or discussions which are so necessary for the right understanding of any of the advanced systems of Indian thought. Titus, in the absence of a book which could give us in brief the main epistemological, ontological and psychological positions of the Indian thinkers. Okay, that's not Titus, that's thus. Thus, in the absence of a book which could give us in brief the main epistemological, ontological and psychological positions of the Indian thinkers, it is difficult even for a good Sanskrit scholar to follow the advanced philosophical literature, even though he may be acquainted with many of the technical philosophical terms. This is pretty scary. I have spoken enough about the difficulties of studying Indian philosophy, but if once a person can get himself used to the technical terms and the general positions of different Indian thinkers and their modes of expression, he can master the whole by patient toil. Yehi hum karne wale hain, okay? We are going to do patient toil. The technical terms, which are a source of difficulty at the beginning, are of inestimable value in helping us to understand the precise and definite meaning of the writers who use them, and the chances of misinterpreting or misunderstanding them are reduced to a minimum. It is, I think, well known that avoidance of technical terms has often rendered philosophical works unduly verbose, which means technical terms use नहीं करेंगे, उसके बदले में क्या हो जाता है कि बहुत extra बातें करना पड़ता है, just because we want to avoid the technical term, and they are liable to misinterpretation. The art of clear writing is indeed a rare virtue, and every philosopher cannot expect to have it, because being a philosopher is not the same as being a skilled writer. But when technical expressions are properly formed, even a bad writer can make himself understood. In the early days of Buddhist philosophy, in the Pali literature, this difficulty is greatly felt. There are some technical terms here which are still very elastic, and their repetition in different places in more or less different senses. Same word का different places में different senses में meaning है, or more or less different senses, heighten the difficulty of understanding the real meaning intended to be conveyed. Difficulty. We are going on understanding that how difficult it is going to be for us to read this, but we are going to read it nonetheless. But is it necessary? that a history of Indian philosophy should be written? This is an important question. There are some people who think that the Indians never rose beyond the stage of simple faith and that therefore they cannot have any philosophy at all in the proper sense of the term. Okay, now he's going to troll hard some haters. Thus, Professor Frank Thilly of the Cornell University says in his History of Philosophy, quote, this is that professor's quote who said that Indian philosophy stands on the shoulders of Greek philosophy. Okay, now we are going to see how he is going to troll. A universal history of philosophy would include the philosophies of all peoples. Not all peoples, however, have produced real systems of thought, and the speculations of only a few can be said to have had a history. Many do not rise beyond the mythological stage. Even the theories of Oriental peoples, the Hindus, Egyptians, Chinese, consist in the main of mythological and ethical doctrines, and are not thoroughgoing systems of thought. They are shot through with poetry and faith. We shall therefore limit ourselves to the study of the Western countries and begin with the philosophy of the ancient Greeks, on whose culture our own civilization in part rests. Okay. End quote. Now Surendranath Dasgupta says about this man, there are doubtless that many other people who hold such uninformed and untrue beliefs, which only show their ignorance of Indian matters. It is not necessary to say anything in order to refute these views, because what follows will, I hope, show the falsity of their beliefs. If they are not satisfied and want to know more definitely and elaborately about the contents of the different systems, I am afraid they will have to go to the originals referred to in the bibliographical notices of the chapters, which I hope someday we will through this channel itself. There is another opinion, that the time has not yet come for an attempt to write a history of Indian philosophy. ये काहे का point है? Two different reasons are given from two different points of view. It is said that the field of Indian philosophy is so vast, and such a vast literature exists on each of the systems, that it is not possible for anyone to collect his materials directly from the original sources, before separate accounts are prepared by specialists working in each of the particular systems. There is some truth in this objection, but although in some of the important systems the literature that exists is exceedingly vast, yet many of them are more or less repetitions of the same subjects, and a judicious selection of 20 or 30 important works on each of the systems could certainly be made, which would give a fairly correct exposition. तो ये काम करने के लिए ही तो हमको लिबरल आर्ट्स फंड करना है. लिबरल आर्ट्स हम फंड करते हैं एनजीओ और हिंदू हेटर बनाने के लिए. लिबरल आर्ट्स हम फंड करते हैं कांत और टॉलस्टॉय पढ़ने के लिए. ये फंड करने से हमको कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. लिबरल आर्ट्स में जाओ, फिलोसफी में जाके सिर्फ ये पढ़ो. पूरा इंडिया ही पढ़ के ख़त्म नहीं कर पाएगा, वो वेस्टर्न पढ़ रहा है पहले. In my own undertaking, so Surendranath Dasgupta is a goddamn genius because of this reason. He got donation from a king of Bangladesh, Kashimganj, a Hindu Bengali king, and with his money he has done this gigantic 5-volume work of history of Indian philosophy out of his own personal effort and time and dedication. Getting back to the book, in my own undertaking in this direction, I have always drawn directly from the original texts, and have always tried to collect my materials from those sources in which they appear at their best. My space has been very limited, and I have chosen the features which appeared to me to be the most important. I had to leave out many discussions of difficult problems and diverse important bearings of each of the systems to many interesting aspects of philosophy. This, I hope, may be excused in a history of philosophy which does not aim at completeness. Okay. There are indeed many defects and shortcomings, and these would have been much less in the case of a writer abler than me. At any rate, it may be hoped that the imperfections of the present attempt will be a stimulus to those whose better and more competent efforts will supersede it. No attempt ought to be called impossible on account of its imperfections. Wow. What a great sentence. Just because it has imperfections, don't think, just because you might end up doing a work imperfectly, don't think it's impossible. Perfection ka baat chhod do. This sounds like a motivational speech now. And also, wait, let me put my mic a little higher up. And also notice that his prediction that people will feel more motivated to do further research from the perspective of documenting the history of Indian philosophy. He's saying that I'm trying to do the best job I can, but I might not succeed in doing the best possible perfect thing. So I hope this will motivate other people to do it. But no one did do it. Okay. In the second place, it is said, this is the second opinion, why there should not be a history of Indian philosophy written currently. That's a pretty weird opinion, but this is the second reason. In the second place, it is said that the Indians had no proper and accurate historical records and biographies, and it is therefore impossible to write a history of Indian philosophy. This objection is also partially valid, but this defect does not affect us so much as one would at first sight suppose. Because though the dates of the earlier beginnings are very obscure, yet in later times we are in a position to affirm some dates and to point out priority and posteriority in the case of other thinkers. As most of the systems developed by side through many centuries, their mutual relations have also developed, and these could be well observed. The special nature of this development has been touched on in the 4th chapter. Most of the systems had very early beginnings and a continuous course of development through the succeeding centuries, and it is not possible to take the state of the philosophy of a particular system at a particular time and contrast it with the state of that system at a later time. Okay. Because the later state did not supersede the previous state, but only showed a more coherent form of it, which was generally true to the original system but was more determinate. Okay. तो जो एवोल्यूशन हुआ 100, 200, 300, 400 साल बाद सेम फिलोसॉफिकल सिस्टम का या सेम फिलोसॉफिकल थॉट का, उसका जो लेटर मैनिफेस्टेशन है, that was not replacing the original thought. That was true to the original system, but was more determinate. सिर्फ और भी ज़्यादा determinate होते गया. सब philosophical thought becomes more and more determinate as time goes on. Evolution through history has in Western countries often brought forth the development of more coherent types of philosophical thought, but in India, though the types remained the same, their development through history made them more and more coherent and determinate. Most of the parts were probably existent in the earlier stages, but they were in an undifferentiated state. Through the criticism and conflict of the different schools existing side by side, the parts of each of the systems of thought became more and more differentiated, determinate, and coherent. In some cases, this development has been almost imperceptible, and in many cases, the earlier forms have been lost or so inadequately expressed that nothing definite could be made out of them. Wherever such a differentiation could be made in the interests of philosophy, I have tried to do it. But I have never considered it desirable that the philosophical interest should be should be subordinated to the chronological. Okay, I have never considered it desirable that the philosophical interest should be subordinated to the chronological interest. It is no doubt true that more definite chronological information would be a very desirable thing, yet I am of opinion that the little chronological data we have give us a fair amount of help in forming a general notion about the growth and development of the different systems by mutual association and conflict. Okay, let's check out some comments now. Shakti Mahalik. Dada, just one question. Your live sessions are very nice, but why post 12 am? Can't there be any normal or feasible time other than late night? No, man. I have to do it after 12 only, because that's my just schedule. I like to work at night. I make music at night, so during the daytime it's just all very irritating. Aniket Gautam. Okay, Aniket Gautam or Aniket Gautam ji, are you the one who sent me some donations in my UPI ID? If that is the case, then thank you. What's your view on Dahej, dowry and women inheritance rights in Hindu society? Well, it should not happen, and I'll have to research more to understand whether there are textual recommendations for that, because the word Dahej has Arabic roots. So I wonder if at all it is a Hindu tradition, because all distortions, child marriage, sati, Dahej, most except the birth-based casteism, which also got concretized in British India. Other than that, all the direct evils that you can point out in Hinduism or Hindu practices, they seem to happen after Middle Eastern colonialism. Okay, so there might have been some issues with that because Muslim kings did at the Hajj. I think it was pronounced something else, Jahed or something. That word got distorted. Okay. if the if the condition of the development of philosophy in India had been the same as in Europe, definite chronological knowledge would be considered much more indispensable. Because when one system supersedes another, or that means replaces another, it is indispensably necessary that we should know which preceded and which succeeded. Yeah. But when the systems are developing side by side, parallelly at the same time, and when we are getting them in their richer and better forms, the interest with regard to the conditions, nature, and environment of their early origin has rather a historical than a philosophical interest. Acha. So he's saying that why I'm not interested in tracking everything to their source material, because source material से तो develop होके और थोड़ा determinate position और coherent philosophical thought बन चुका है. So if I'm getting the coherent version, I don't need to spend unlimited amounts of time tracking down the initial source thought. I have tried at best I could to form certain general notions as regards the earlier versions of some of the systems, but though the various features of these systems at these stages in detail may not be ascertainable, yet this, I think, could never be considered as invalidating the whole program. Moreover, even if we knew definitely the correct dates of the thinkers of the same system, we could not treat them separately, as is done in European philosophy, without unnecessarily repeating the same thing 20 times over, because they all dealt with the same system and tried to bring out the same type of thought in more and more determinate forms. European philosophy का मजाक उड़ा रहा है. Okay, Tattvabodhaka is saying Manusmriti and some other smritis classifies dowry as asura type of vivaha. I see. Actually, according to my family tradition, mother's property is divided between her daughter and daughter-in-law. Yeah, there are matrilineal families in India, right? Shravyamin is saying Stridhan was actually something given to the daughters by their father, right? Which later evolved into dowry. Manusmriti says that the mother's entire property should go to the daughters. Yeah. Surely, like how today's domestic violence law has been manipulated by some women, same was done by men in the case of Stridhan evolving into dowry, I feel. Yeah, probably. Okay. The earliest literature of India is the Vedas. These consist mostly of hymns in praise of nature gods such as fire, wind, etc. Excepting in some of the hymns of the later parts of the work, probably around about 1000 BC, there is not much philosophy in them in our sense of the term. It is here that we first find intensely interesting philosophical questions of a more or less cosmological character, expressed in terms of poetry and imagination, which means in the later Vedic era, that is 1000 BC around, Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda. In the later Vedic works called the Brahmanas and the Aryanakas, written mostly in prose, which, okay, those are in prose, I didn't know, mostly in prose, which followed the Vedic hymns, there are two tendencies vis-a-vis, one that sought to establish the magical forms of ritualistic worship, and the other which indulged in speculative thinking through crude generalizations. This latter tendency, that is the crude generalization, speculative thinking through crude generalization, yet tendency was indeed much feebler than the former. This was weaker. And it might appear that the ritualistic tendency had actually swallowed up what little of philosophy the later parts of the Vedic hymns were trying to express. Okay. But there are unmistakable marks that this tendency existed and worked. Next to this come certain treatises written in prose and verse called the Upanishads, which contain various sorts of philosophical thoughts, mostly monistic or singularistic, but also some pluralistic and dualistic ones. These are not reasoned statements, but utterances of truths. Intuitively perceived or felt as unquestionably real and indubitable, and carrying great force, vigor, and persuasiveness with them. inexplicable truths, Aurobindo calls this concept. It is very probable that many of the earliest parts of this literature are as old as 500 BC to 700 BC. Buddhist philosophy began with the Buddha from sometime about 500 BC. There is reason to believe that Buddhist philosophy continued to develop in India in one or other of its vigorous forms till sometime about the 10th or 11th century AD. The earliest beginnings of the other Indian systems of thought are also to be sought chiefly between the age of the Buddha to about 200 BC. Jaina philosophy was probably prior to Buddha, but except in its early days, when it came in conflict with the doctrines of the Buddha, it does not seem to me that the Jaina thought came much in contact with other systems of Hindu thought. Okay, so when Jain thought was conflicting with Buddha, with Buddhism, with the doctrines of Buddha, only in those days, it came in contact with Hinduism as well. Excepting in some forms of Vaishnava thought in later times, Jain thought is seldom alluded to by the Hindu writers or later Buddhists, though some Jains like Haribhadra and Gunaratna tried to refute the Hindu and Buddhist systems. The non-aggressive nature of their religion and ideal may to a certain extent explain it. But there may be other reasons too, which it is difficult for us to guess. It is interesting to note that though there have been some dissensions amongst the Jains about dogmas and creeds, Jain philosophy has not split into many schools of thought more or less differing from one another as Buddhist thought did. Okay, I did not know this about Jainism. Any Jains here watching this video? Okay, some comments are coming. Okay, you all are discussing dowry. That belt is called Karavali, right? Coastal Karnataka. Ayuva Talova. Okay. Nice. Shravya Amin, what kind of upadhi is Amin? What is its origin? I thought Amin is an Islamic surname. All this while I thought Shravya Amin is Muslim. Isn't she Muslim? Aren't you Muslim, Shravya? Okay. Less differing from one another as Buddhist thought did. The first volume of this work. Okay, we are nearing the end of the preface, it seems. Has not split. So Jainism did not split into different schools of thought like Buddhism did. The first volume of this work will contain Buddhist and Jain philosophy and the 6 systems of Hindu thought. Okay, these six systems of orthodox Hindu thought are the Samkhya, the Yoga, the Nyaya, the Vaisheshika, the Mimamsha, generally known as Purva Mimamsha, and the Vedanta, known also as Uttar Mimamsha. Of these, what is differently known as Samkhya and Yoga are but different schools of one system. Yes, that is why I have always heard the phrase Samkhya Yoga. The Vaisheshika and the Nyaya in later times became so mixed up that though in early times the similarity of the former with Mimamsha was greater than that with Nyaya, they came to be regarded as fundamentally almost the same systems. Nyaya and Vaisheshika. Wasn't Vaisheshika Sutra written by Kanada? I have heard atoms and nucleus were discussed philosophically in Vaisheshika Sutra. I intend to read a paper on Wednesday or Thursday on atoms, the philosophical roots of Indian concepts of atom and Atman. I have found a nice paper on it in JSTOR. Okay, so Nyaya and Vaisheshika have therefore been treated. Nyaya and Vaisheshika therefore have been treated together. Okay, Nyaya and Vaisheshika together. In addition to these systems, some theistic systems began to grow prominent from the 9th century AD. Okay, theistic systems from 9th century AD, 900 AD. They also probably had their early beginnings at the time of the Upanishads, but at that time their interest was probably concentrated on problems of morality and religion. It is not improbable that these were associated with certain metaphysical theories also, but no works treating them in a systematic way are now available. Okay. One of their most important early works is the Bhagavad Gita. This book is rightly regarded as one of the greatest masterpieces of Hindu thought. It is written in verse and deals with moral, religious and metaphysical problems in a loose form. It is its lack of system and method which gives it its peculiar charm, more akin to the poetry of the Upanishads, more similar to the poetry of the Upanishads than to the dialectical and systematic Hindu thought. Okay. From the 9th century onwards, attempts were made to supplement these loose theistic ideas which were floating about and forming integral parts of religious creeds by metaphysical theories. Theism is often dualistic and pluralistic, and so are all these systems, which are known as different schools of Vaishnava philosophy. Most of the Vaishnava thinkers wished to show that their systems were taught in the Upanishads and thus wrote commentaries thereon to prove their interpretations, and also wrote commentaries on the Brahma Sutra, the classical exposition of the philosophy of the Upanishads. In addition to the works of these Vaishnava thinkers, there sprang up another class of theistic works which were of a more eclectic nature. These also had their beginnings in periods as old as the Upanishads. They are known as the Shaiva and Tantra thought and are dealt with in the second volume of this work. So, all the Shaivites in the chat, second book में आ रहा है Shaiva and Tantra discussion. Okay, let's check some comment sections. People have confused before that I am Muslim. Yes, Amin sounds like Amin Arabic and Amen Aramaic, but then again I know Hindu Khans also. Yeah, there are many Bengali Hindu Khans, but that's actually Khan. That pronunciation is Khan, not Khan. Although Bengalis also pronounce normal Muslim Khans as Khan, so who knows. I am a girl, it won't go good for me, और अब मेरे इतने बुरे दिन नहीं है. Not problem, I'm not a Muslim. Okay, Tattva Bodhaka is saying Brahma Sutra's Avirodha Adhyaya has chapters dedicated to critically analyze non-Vedic schools. Okay, Bauddha, Jaina, Charvaka, etc. I see. Hence, every Vedanta philosopher evaluates these three schools. Samkhya Yoga of Bhagavad Gita is different from Sankhya and Yoga school. Oh my God, Sankhya dealt with in the Gita is different. Arey, shit. How do you know so much? क्या क्या पढ़ना पड़ता है ये सब के लिए? How do you know this? I thought Samkhya and Yoga are same. Samkhya Yoga is the name of a chapter in Gita. Okay, I feel stupid now. Okay, let me have a coffee sip. This book is very, very lucidly written, right? This is let me tell you, old English writers, old Indians, that is those who have written until 50s, 60s, even 70s to some extent, their English is very, very difficult to read usually, because how we speak a language also keeps evolving, right? So when I decided to read this, and I decided to read this live on a live stream, I thought that it's going to be very tough for me, and it's going to be very tough for you all to follow as well, and it's going to be very tough if I want to read this, grasp it, and then discuss this. But this seems to be written so lucidly, so beautifully. It seems like a book written just this year, right? The language sentence construction is just so easy. I think now I'm going to blame everyone else, all the other books, English books that I've read from the 50s, which have difficult English. Now I understand that it's there. Those authors had a weakness in comprehension. That's not the fault of the English language of those days. Surendranath Dasgupta is writing so lucidly. Okay, and Inner is saying, really cool that this is put on a government website for all. Making such books and documents public is a really great thing for scholars and amateurs alike. Yes, and this website is very beautifully, smoothly running. That page turns beautifully, and there are countless insanely great legendary books on this Ministry of Culture website. I found that. We thus see that the earliest beginnings of most systems of Hindu thought can be traced to some time between 600 BC to 100 or 200 BC. Okay. It is extremely difficult to say anything about the relative priority of the systems with any degree of certainty. Some conjectural attempts have been made in this work with regard to some of the systems, but how far they are correct, it will be for our readers to judge. Moreover, during the earliest manifestation of a system, some crude outlines only are traceable. As time went on, the systems of thought began to develop side by side. Most of them were taught from the time in which they were first conceived to about the 17th century AD, 1700 AD. 17th century AD means 1600 AD, right? in an unbroken chain of teachers and pupils. Listen to this sentence. This is very important. Some of those thoughts, philosophies, schools of philosophy, were taught from the time in which they were first conceived, that is 1000 BC at least, to about the 17th century AD, in an unbroken chain of teachers and pupils, Guru Shishya Parampara. Even now, each system of Hindu thought has its own adherents, though few people now care to write any new works upon them, thanks to Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who said, "Screw Sanskrit. What's the point of reading Sanskrit?" In the history of the growth of any system of Hindu thought, we find that as time went on and as new problems were suggested, each system tried to answer them consistently with its own doctrines. The order in which we have taken the philosophical systems could not be strictly a chronological one. Okay, so it's not a chronological order that they are going to approach here. Thus, though it is possible that the earliest speculations of some of the Samkhya, Yoga, and Mimamsa were prior to Buddhism, yet they have been treated after Buddhism and Jainism because the elaborate works of these systems which we now possess are later than Buddhism. Okay, I had no idea. I always thought Mimamsa was Buddhist. We know so little. Samkhya, Yoga, and Mimamsa were prior to Buddhism. But the versions of Samkhya, Yoga, and Mimamsa that we are going to discuss, since they came after Buddhism, we will have to obviously then take into account that there might be intermingling of thoughts with Buddhism and Jainism. In my opinion, the Vaisheshika system is also probably pre-Buddhistic, but it has been treated later, partly on account of its association with Nyaya and partly on account of the fact that all of its commentaries are of a much later date. It seems to me almost certain that enormous quantities of old philosophical literature have been lost, yes, thanks to Bhaktiar Khilji, have been lost, which if found, could have been of use to us in showing the stages of the early growth of the systems and their mutual relations. But as they are not available, we have to be satisfied with what remains. The original sources from which I have drawn my materials have all been indicated in the brief accounts of the literature of each system, which I have put in before beginning the study of any particular system of thought. Okay, let's just check some comments again. Nina is saying, oh, by the way, there were Hindu kings with Arabic origin names too. For example, Hammira Deva of Chauhan Rajputs, whose name derives from the Arabic Amir. Yeah. Rabindranath Tagore has a legendary story on this. Rabindranath or one of his brothers, I think. Hambire Rajolab. Amir, but it got Sanskritized into Hammira. Yeah, everything gets Sanskritized. Okay, you won't believe this. I'm reading the Bengali Rig Veda, right? And there, the translator, who has translated it in the late 1800s, in about 1888 or sometime like that, he calls Max Muller Mokho Muller. Mokho is the word for moksha. He even Sanskritizes Max as Moksh Muller. Everything was Sanskritized. Remember, have you all seen the Chanakya series, the TV serial that's up on YouTube for free? There, even Alexander is called Alakashendra. So those days, everything was being Sanskritized. Samrat Sikandar Alakashendra. Kabir is a common name for both Hindus and Muslims here. Yeah. Dasgupta's words are proper. Samkhya Darshana and Yoga Darshana are sister schools. While Samkhya deals with theory, Yoga deals with practice. Okay, both from one system. I see. Kabir Das Hindus also keep in. By the way, Christina is also a Hindu name, apparently because of Guru Ma sister Christina, whom Swami Vivekananda initiated. I know a Naga girl. I thought she was Christian, but nope. I see. Samkhya means numbers. Sankhya schools is called Sankhya because it deals with the 24 principles that make up the universe and dictate its happenings. Are you sure? Okay, you are writing SAN, right? But I thought we were talking about SAM, M for Mumbai. Samkhya Yoga. Okay, that M is pronounced as NG in Bengali. So the problem is, so in Bengali, Samkhya Yoga is called Shankho Jog. But the Sankhya you are saying, which is a number, the Bengali for that is Shankha. So I wondered if Samkhya is supposed to be number, because otherwise Bengali scholars would have called it Shankha Jog and not Shankho Jog. I'll have to ask more people about this. Yoga Darshana is derived from the renowned Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Hence, Yoga Darshana is different from yoga term used in Gita. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That I realized after reading Sitaram Goel's How I Became a Hindu. Yoga is not just about doing stretches and doing workouts. Yoga is much deeper than that. I had no idea, and I realized it after reading How I Became a Hindu by Sitaram Goel. Okay. Getting back to the book now. The original sources from which I have drawn my materials have all been indicated in the brief accounts of the literature of each system, which I have put in before beginning the study of any particular system of thought. In my interpretations, I have always tried to follow the original sources as accurately as I could. This has sometimes led to old and unfamiliar models of expression, but this course seems to me to be preferable to the adoption of European modes of thought, because for the European mode of thought for the expression of Indian ideas. But even in spite of these striking similarities to many of the modern philosophical doctrines and ideas will doubtless be noticed. But even in spite of this, striking similarities to many of the modern philosophical doctrines and ideas will be doubtless be noticed. Okay. This only proves that the human mind follows more or less the same modes of rational thought. Yes, this is why decoloniality does not mean moral relativism. Why? This is why. Because some thoughts are same modes of rational thought, okay? Some thoughts are eternal, some truths are eternal. Some things are objectively bad, some things are objectively good. There is objectivity. I have never tried to compare any phase of Indian thought with European, because this is beyond the scope of my present attempt. But if I may be allowed to express my own conviction, I might say that many of the philosophical doctrines of European philosophy are essentially the same as those found in Indian philosophy. This is exactly what we were discussing yesterday when Niner, this guy commenting on the comment sections, Niner, he sent the article of Shashi Tharoor, where Shashi Tharoor is countering against the idea of a civilization state. And Shashi Tharoor goes on saying that liberalism, enlightenment era, renaissance era thinking, isse jo nation state hua, that is the source of all things good in our lives. Civilization states will lead to devilish, devastating things, etc. And we were discussing that even liberalism was not conjured up one fine morning from the brains of some one guy, right? It was building on the past scholarship of all other cultures and religions, or regions at least. Okay, and this is that exact same thing which is being said by Surendranath Dasgupta here. He's saying that many of the philosophical doctrines of European philosophy, on which liberalism is based, according to Tharoor, are essentially the same as those found in Indian philosophy. तो हमारा fundamentals different है अलग दूसरे लोगों से, and that is why a Hindu fundamentalist will be different from fundamentalist of another religion. This is what needs to be pointed out. Hindu fundamentalist कोई हुआ तो क्या हो गया? As those found in Indian philosophy. The main difference is often the difference of the point of view from which the same problems appeared in such a variety of forms in the two countries. My own view with regard to the net value of Indian philosophical development will be expressed in the concluding chapter of the second volume of the present work. Okay. Chapter 2, we are beginning chapter 2. We finished the introduction already. Nice. Let me drink some coffee. Okay, Tattva Bodhaka is saying Yoga Darshana is derived from the renowned Patanjali. Yeah. Mimamsa just means rules, regulations, procedure. Hence, one can see it directly deals with action or karma. Mimamsa believes only karma leads to moksha, not jnana or bhakti. Okay. Interesting. And actually in Bengali, Mimamsa means something different. Mimamsa means a final justice that is delivered by a referee or a third neutral person in case of a conflict. That's Mimamsa. Okay. Let's start chapter 2. You guys are all good? We are going to get into real depths now. The Vedas, Brahmanas and their philosophy. The Vedas and their antiquity. The sacred books of India, the Vedas, are generally believed to be the earliest literary record of the Indo-European race. Though in those days everyone believed in Aryan invasion and migration theory. So migration might have happened anyway. It is indeed difficult to say when the earliest portions of these compositions came into existence. Many shrewd guesses have been offered, but none of them can be proved to be incontestably true. Max Muller supposed the date to be 1200 BC, Hogg 2400 BC, and Bal Gangadhar Tilak 4000 BC. But Bal Gangadhar Tilak also believed Aryan migration from the Arctic. The ancient Hindus seldom kept any historical record of their literary, religious, or political achievements. The Vedas were handed down from mouth to mouth from a period of unknown antiquity, and the Hindus generally believed that they were never composed by men. Yeah, that is why Apaurushaya. It was therefore generally supposed that either they were taught by God to the sages, or that they were of themselves revealed to the sages, who were the seers or mantra drashta of the hymns. Thus we find that when some time had elapsed after the composition of the Vedas, people had come to look upon them not only as very old, but so old that they had, theoretically at least, no beginning in time, though they were believed to have been revealed at some unknown remote period at the beginning of each creation. And I personally think it's before the last ice age. Another interesting comment. Anna, my bad, let me explain. Sankhya is the root word. Samkhya and Sankhya is its derivative. Okay, Samkhya numbers, and Samkhya that which is derived from Sankhya. Okay, Kunti. Okay. Kunti Kaunteya logic. I see. Yeah, like in Brahmapura I was reading, a person who is called Shunak, his children will be called Shaunakas. Okay, so derived from Sankhya. So Shankha is derived from Shankho, but they are not the same. This is tricky. So anyway, how do you know this stuff? The places of the Vedas in the Hindu mind. When the Vedas were composed, there was probably no system of writing prevalent in India, but such was the scrupulous zeal of the Brahmins, who got the whole Vedic literature by heart by hearing it from their preceptors, that it has been transmitted most faithfully to us through the course of the last 3000 years or more, with little or no interpolations at all. The religious history of India had suffered considerable changes in the latter periods since the time of the Vedic civilization, but such was the reverence paid to the Vedas that they had ever remained as the highest religious authority for all sections of the Hindus at all times. Even at this day, all the obligatory duties of the Hindus at birth, marriage, death, etc. are performed according to the old Vedic ritual. Okay, Afin is saying, bro, your understanding of Khan and Kha is wrong. Please go through my previous comments. Okay, let's check it out. Oh, bro, in language you do it by removing NR, etc. Like the Khan becomes Kha, Gram becomes Ga, Ek, Ga, Ga, etc. This is absolutely grammatical. Thus, Khan is Kha. I told you how Hindu Khan. I see. So you are saying that the Bengali Khans are exactly the same Khans as Muslim Khans. But Khan used to be, see why Muslims got the surname of Khan, because they are the descendants of the people who were the subjugated subjects, subjugated people living under the Mongolian kings, right? Genghis Khan, etc. That's how their Khan came about, and that's why Arabians, Middle Eastern people, look down upon Muslims with the surname Khan, because they think, these guys were subjugated by Genghis Khan. They were so in awe of Genghis Khan and his family that Khan, having the Khan surname, became the aspirational model. That's why the Khan surname came about. Then how might Bengalis have had Khan surnames? Maybe because these people were earlier are descendants from Mongolians or migrants. I don't know. In Sanskrit too, Mimamsha can be used to indicate conflict resolution too. For the sake of conflict resolution came about rules, regulations, adjective procedures. They are all rested. Yeah. Okay. Now back to the book. The prayers that a Brahmin now says 3 times a day are the same selections of Vedic verses as were used as prayer verses 2 or 3,000 years ago. A little insight into the life of an ordinary Hindu of the present day will show the system of image worship is one that has been grafted upon his life, the regular obligatory duties of which are ordered according to the old Vedic rites. Thus, an orthodox Brahmin can dispense with image worship if he likes, but not so with his daily Vedic prayers or other obligatory ceremonies. Thus, an orthodox Brahmin may stop doing image worship if he likes, but not so with his daily Vedic prayers or other obligatory ceremonies. Even at this day, there are persons who bestow immense sums of money for the performance and teaching of Vedic sacrifices and rituals. Most of the Sanskrit literatures that flourished after the Vedas base upon them their own validity and appeal to them as authority. Yes, Vedokilo Dharma Moolam or Dharmakilo Vedamulam. Yeah, Vedokilo Dharma Moolam. That everything about dharma has to be based on Vedas. If it's in contradiction with Vedas, then it's not. Then it will have to be Mimamsa, etc. People who it will have to be considered Nastika. Okay. Shravya is saying, but ain't the surname Khan too derived from the Mongolian Han? Okay. Ha. Yeah. Their H, KH, K are all similar, right? Ha. That's why they say Alhamdulillah, Habib Nurmagomedov. That is it. Achyuta Shivaramanu is saying there are two types of Mimamsa, Purva and Uttara. You may want to interview R. Ganesh Shatavadani. He is an intellectual extraordinaire. Okay, Achyuta ji, we actually discussed this just a while back. Even Surendranath Dasgupta himself was writing this, that Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. From that only, I guess, the terms Purva Paksha and Uttar Paksha came, right? The debates. Okay. Even at this day, there are persons who bestow immense sums of money for the performance and teaching of Vedic sacrifices and rituals. Most of the Sanskrit literatures that flourished after the Vedas base upon them their own validity and appeal to them as authority. Now, systems of Hindu philosophy not only own their allegiance to the Vedas, but the adherents of each one of them would often quarrel with others and maintain its superiority by trying to prove that it and it alone was the faithful follower of the Vedas and represented correctly their views. The laws which regulate the social, legal, domestic, and religious customs and rites of the Hindus, even to the present day, are said to be but mere systematized memories of old Vedic teachings and are held to be obligatory on their authority. Even under British administration, in the inheritance of property, adoption, and in such other legal transactions, Hindu law is followed. What? Wait. What did he just say? Even under British administration. Oh, yeah. British administration in India. I thought in England. So, yeah, Hindu law is followed, and this claims to draw its authority from the Vedas. To enter into details is unnecessary, but suffice it to say that the Vedas, far from being regarded as a dead literature of the past, are still looked upon as the origin and source of almost all literatures except purely secular poetry and drama. Thus, in short, we may say that in spite of the many changes that time has wrought, the orthodox Hindu life may still be regarded in the main as an adumbration of the Vedic life, which had never ceased to shed its light all through the past. Okay. Let's check the comment again. Afin is saying that is true, but Mongolian Buddhist considers Chengiz to be Chakravarti Dasharatha king. Okay. No Hindu Khans have a Vaishnava Guru Shishya Parampara. They take name from Syed Ibrahim Rasa Khan, who was a Bhakti saint of Krishna Bhakti like Kabir Das. Okay. Yeah, just like I was saying a few days back that I am the only YouTuber in the world whose audience and commenters are more knowledgeable than the YouTuber himself. Okay, now another sub-chapter is beginning. Classification of the Vedic literature. Okay, by the way, since we wasted about half an hour because of my internet connection, I'm planning to do this till 3 a.m. and instead of 2:30 a.m. So let me know if you guys will be online, okay? So if you guys are online till 2, you all might be online till 3 as well. Classification of the Vedic literature. A beginner who is introduced for the first time to the study of later Sanskrit literature is likely to appear somewhat confused when he meets with authoritative texts of diverse purport and subjects having the same generic name Veda or Shruti from Shru to here, because Veda in its wider sense is not the name of any particular book. but of the literature of a particular epoch extending over a long period, say 2000 years or so. As this literature represents the total achievements of the Indian people in different directions for such a long period, it must of necessity be of a diversified character. If we roughly classify this huge literature from the points of view of age, language, and subject matter, we can point out four different types, namely the Samhita or collection of verses, Sam and together Hita put. Okay, Shang, Sang, and Hita. Hita means putting together. Okay. So one category is Samhita, second category is Brahmanas, and then Aryanakas, forest treatises, and then the Upanishads. All these literatures, both prose and verse, were looked upon as so holy that in early times it was thought almost a sacrilege to write them. They were therefore learnt by heart by the Brahmins from the mouth of their preceptors and were hence called Shruti, literally anything heard. Okay. Tattva Bodhaka is saying Bhagavad Gita chapter 15 is a very good read to understand the importance of Vedas. I see. Shravya is saying, is the Gita by Chinmay Mission good? I have heard that the best one is the one by Gita Press. So that's the one I plan to read. But before that, I'll read the entire Mahabharata of Vivek Debroy. So maybe there I'll understand the Gita as well. Yes, True Words by Dasgupta, the correct or valid interpretation battle. Yes, Chinmay is good, even ISKCON is good, but their recension is more based on Bhakti Yoga. ISKCON's I don't trust ISKCON's after reading Prabhupada's discussions with his disciple in the book Beyond Delusion and Doubt. That's too commie and Abrahamic for me. Anytime you discard industry and industrialization or factories and business as inherently oppressive, I'm done with that person's ideology. That's very problematic according to me. You can use any book for direct translation, but for interpretation you have to read Gita Bhashya of various people. Various people actually is the best idea. Read multiple accounts, but Gita Press seems to be the consensus that one's the best. But it's not ever available online. The English version of the Gita Press Bhagavad Gita. You'll have to go to their shops. Okay, the Samhitas. There are four collections or Samhitas, namely Rig Veda, Samaveda, Yajur Veda, and Atharva Veda. Of these, the Rig Veda is probably the earliest. The Samaveda has practically no independent value, for it consists of stanzas taken, excepting only 75, entirely from the Rig Veda, which were meant to be sung to certain fixed melodies, and may thus be called the Book of Chants. The Yajur Veda, however, contains, in addition to the verses taken from the Rig Veda, many original prose formulas. The arrangement of the verses of the Samaveda is solely with reference to their place and use in the Soma sacrifice. The contents of the Yajur Veda are arranged in the order in which the verses were actually employed in the various religious sacrifices. It is therefore called the Veda of Yajus, that is, sacrificial prayers. These may be contrasted with the arrangement in the Rig Veda in this that there the verses are generally arranged in accordance with the gods who are adorned in them. Okay. Thus, for example, first we get all the poems addressed to Agni or the fire god, then all those to the god Indra, and so on. Okay, yeah, that is true. The fourth collection, the Atharva Veda, as opposed to this, I'll have to read the previous sentence once more. These may be contrasted with the arrangement of the Rig Veda in this that there the verses are generally arranged in accordance with the gods who adorn them in Rig Veda, but in Yajur Veda they are arranged in order which the verses were actually employed in the various religious sacrifices. Okay. तो पूजा पाठ जैसे चल रहा है उस ऑर्डर में जो बोलना है उसका मैनुअल है यजुर वेदा, बट ऋग वेदा में ऐसा ही सिर्फ डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है कि हर गॉड का पूरा हर देवता का हर डेटी का जो मंत्र है वो सब पहले एक डेटी का पूरा ख़त्म करेंगे फिर दूसरे डेटी पे जाएंगे. दैट्स हाउ ऋग वेदा इज रिटन. All those to the god Indra and so on. The fourth collection, the Atharva Veda, probably attained its present form considerably later than the Rig Veda. In spirit, however, as Professor MacDonald says, quote, it is not only entirely different from the Rig Veda, but represents a much more primitive stage of thought. while the Rig Veda deals almost exclusively with the higher gods as conceived by a comparatively advanced and refined sacerdotal class. The Atharva Veda is, in the main, a book of spells and incantations appealing to the demon world and teems with notions about witchcraft current among the lower grades of the population and derived from an immemorial antiquity. These two, thus complementary to each other in contents, are obviously the most important of the four Vedas. Okay, did you guys know this? The Atharva Veda is supposed to be a book of chants, spells, and incantations, supposedly used by lower class of peoples. Okay, let's check some comments again. Shravya, I have read the ISKCON one, but the interpretation was not sitting right with me, so thought to get Gita. Yeah. Afin is saying Chaukhamba has published a Gita with 7 or 8 bhashyas of different sampradayas. That is good if you simply want to learn, but stick to the sampradaya for your own sadhana. I see. Tatavodhaka is saying, okay, in Hindi, I can't read that. Aranyak, just like Aranyakand of Ramayana. Yes, because the ISKCON one is based off Bhakti Yoga, that is why. Yeah. Okay, now the Brahmanas. After the Samhitas, there grew up the theological treatises called Brahmanas, which were of a distinctly different literary type. They are written in prose and explain the sacred significance of the different rituals to those who are not already familiar with them. Professor MacDonald says, they reflect the spirit of an age in which all intellectual activity is concentrated on the sacrifice, describing its ceremonies, discussing its value, speculating on its origin and significance. These works are full of dogmatic assertions, fanciful symbolism, and speculations of an unbounded imagination in the field of sacrificial details. The sacrificial ceremonies were probably never so elaborate at the time when the early hymns were composed, but when the collections of hymns were being handed down from generation to generation, the ceremonials became more and more complicated. Thus, there came about the necessity of the distribution of the different sacrificial functions among several distinct classes of priests. We may assume that this was a period when the caste system was becoming established, and when the only thing which could engage wise and religious minds was sacrifice and its elaborate rituals. Okay. Thus, there came about the necessity of the distribution of the different sacrificial functions among several distinct classes of priests. इतना complicated हो गया है कि division of labor करना पड़ रहा है. Free speculative thinking was thus subordinated to the service of the sacrifice. Okay, free speculative thinking अभी थोड़ा कम हो रहा है. And the result was the production of the most fanciful, sacramental and symbolic system, unparalleled anywhere but among the Gnostics. It is now generally believed that the close of the Brahmana period was not later than 500 BC. Okay. Reading the comments once. Afin says Gita Press has the blessings of 2 out of 4 Smarta Mahatas and a lot of Vaishnavacharyas like Madhva Sampradaya, but they don't have blessings from other Sampradaya. Thus, Shaivite Shaktas have raised issues with Gita Press, but in general, compared to others, they are the best. I see. Okay, so can you tell me which Gitas, which translations have been said are good by Shaivites and Shaktas? I'll check them out as well. Trayi. Vedas are called Trayi or the triplet. Though there are 4 in number, one may wonder why Trayi. It's because of the literary style of the Vedas: poem, prose, music. I see. That's rap. Rap has rhythm and poetry. Vedas don't have rhythm much, although you do need to sing, chant them in some fixed tempo, obviously. The Aryanyakas. As a further development of the Brahmanas, however, we get the Aryanyakas or forest treatises. These works were probably composed for old men who had retired into the forest and were thus unable to perform elaborate sacrifices, requiring a multitude of accessories and articles which could not be procured in forests. Yeah, forests se yaad aaya. Yesterday I was reading something about Lord Ram's great-grandfather, Harivangsha. Harivangsha is written on him, right? No, Raghuvangsha. Raghuvangsha is about that king Raghu. who used to who was pretty feared in the Rar region of Bengal. So then I was reading up on him, because first I thought Raghu is Ram, because Ram is also known as Raghu in Bengal, and he's worshipped as Raghu, Raghupati, etc. But I found out that King Raghu retired to a life in the forest, and that is how a lot of modern day so-called tribals were actually in the past kings. Many in Chhattisgarh have directly or in Jharkhand, they have said that, hey, we used to be kings. They consciously went to the forest out of their own accord, because they did not want to subscribe to the Nagara and Grama binary, or to the Varnashram system, or the Varna Pratha. So it was their conscious decision that, okay, we'll just be a Varna and live in the forest. क्योंकि तब तो forest और नगर ग्राम में comfort का मतलब heaven and hell difference नहीं था ना. It's not like नगर में कोई टेस्ला लेके घूम रहा है और जंगल में मच्छर काट रहा है. The difference was minimal in terms of comfort. So they thought, जंगल में रहेंगे थोड़ा, we'll just have intellectual thoughts and stuff, and see nature from up close. We'll live off the land, those kinds of things. So it was not like evil Brahmins were sending people because they hated them and turning them into Dalits and kicking them off to the forests. Okay. Tattva Bodhaka is saying also Sama has a special place in the Gita. In the 10th chapter of Krishna, 10th chapter Krishna says, Vadanam Sama Vedoshmi. I am Sama among the Vedas. Oh my god. Vedas cannot be understood without Vedangas. Shiksha, Nirukta, Kalpa, Jyotisha, Nirukta Chandas. I see. Yeah, that's what I was reading yesterday only in the Bengali Rig Veda. Okay, Efin says, even in Purans, the poems are bifurcated into 3 parts. One part is literally called Atharva Veda verses, those which are not to be directly translated but mean something different. Yeah. Okay. These works, the Aranyakas, were probably composed for old men who had retired into the forest and were thus unable to perform elaborate sacrifices requiring a multitude of accessories and articles which could not be procured in forests. तो उनके लिए आरण्यका है, Aranyaka. In these, meditations on certain symbols were supposed to be of great merit, and they gradually began to supplant the sacrifices as being of a superior order. Okay. Meditations on certain symbols, and that began to supplant the sacrifices as being of a superior order. तो अभी symbols का importance बढ़ गया, actual sacrifice से ज़्यादा. It is here that we find that amongst a certain section of intelligent people, the ritualistic ideas began to give way, and philosophic speculations about the nature of truth became gradually substituted in their place. Okay, to take an illustration from the beginning of the Brihadaranyaka, we find that instead of the actual performance of the horse sacrifice, that is Ashwamedha, there are directions for meditating upon the dawn, Ushas, as the head of the horse, the sun as the eye of the horse, the air as its life, and so on. Wow. This is indeed a distinct advancement of the claims of speculation or meditation over the actual performance of the complicated ceremonials of sacrifice. The growth of the subjective speculation as being capable of bringing the highest good gradually resulted in the supersession of Vedic ritualism, right, and the establishment of the claims of philosophic meditation and self-knowledge as the highest goal of life. Wow. Thus we find that the Aranyaka age was a period during which free thinking tried gradually to shake off the shackles of ritualism, which had fettered it for a long time. And I will guarantee you this much, judging from the times we live in today, at least. So I am definitely applying today's lens in those days, that when do people do these? They get rid of their rituals and get more towards free thinking is when economic prosperity happens, okay? I think this is why this is happening. When Aranyaka was being written, that might be the peak of our economic awesomeness, okay? See, look at why the South, especially Karnataka, is making Kantara today. Hombale is entirely based in Kantara, right? KGF, etc. And then Telugu industry as well. These guys are making such, and Tamil industry has always been good in music, etc. I've never heard much Kannada music and Telugu music before these movies recently became a hit. But why are they the ones making the coolest of movies, most awesome, fascinating of movies? Because of their economic superiority. when has Bengal, like after Satyajit Ray, even Satyajit Ray is not a very interesting movie maker. He is interesting because of his concepts and because how much advanced he was compared to the rest of the country. But his movies, I would not consider any of his movies in my top 3 list. And top 3 Bengali, even Bengali top 3 Bengali movies में Satyajit Ray नहीं है मेरे. But especially after Satyajit Ray, when Satyajit Ray was alive, there was at least some remnants of some ruins of past prosperity रह गया था बंगाल में. Okay, even though the state government funded his films, even state government के पास थोड़ा बहुत पैसा रह गया था उसके पहले इतना prosperity था स्टेट में, इसलिए. मगर जिस दिन सत्यजीत रे मर गए उसके बाद से फिल्म मेकिंग भी ऑलमोस्ट बंद हो गया है. They either make commercial mass movies that I'll bleed from my eyes if I watch them for more than 10 minutes, or Rituparna Ghosh started making movies which will make me fall asleep in 10 minutes. Finally Srijit Mukherjee came about, and for a while he bridged the gap. He has today bridged the gap entirely almost. The urban audience and the village audience both watch Srijit Mukherjee movies, but it's still nowhere near a Kantara or RRR Bahubali, obviously. Okay. The Sama has fixed rhythms. Tattvabodhaka is saying Sama has fixed rhythms and talas. One of the Upanishads of Sama is literally called Talavakara Upanishad. अरे इतना कैसे पता है तुम लोगों को? Talavakaras were sages who mastered talas. Okay, they gave meters, rhythm, tempo, etc. to Vedas. Damn. Shaivite epistemology is different. Abhinav Gupta, Sripati Pandita, Shrikanta Pandita, etc. 4 parts for 4 ashrama. Anna. Okay. Brahmana for Brahmacharya, Samhita for Grihastha, Aranyaka for Vanaprastha, and Upanishads for Sannyasa. Okay. Right. Yeah, Vivek Debray was saying this as well. Brahmana for Brahmacharya, Samhita for... Okay, so for us, we are Grihasthas essentially. So, hamare liye Rigved Samhita. Afin is saying, yes, that is what I was saying. While they don't kick out the Purans like Arya Samaj does, they don't really hold it as high as, say, a Vaishnava and Smartha will do. Okay. Yeah, how are you guys so knowledgeable in this? Okay. So, getting back to the book now. The growth of the subjective speculation as being capable of bringing the highest good gradually resulted in the supersession of Vedic ritualism and the establishment of the claims of philosophical meditation and self-knowledge as the highest goal of life. Thus, we find that the Aranyaka age was a period during which free thinking tried gradually to shake off the shackles of ritualism which had fettered it for a long time. It was thus that the Aranyakas could pave the way for the Upanishads, revive the germs of philosophic speculation in the Vedas, and develop them in a manner which made the Upanishads the source of all philosophy that arose in the world of Hindu thought. Okay, let me take a sip of coffee. Okay, the Rig Veda, its civilization. Yeah, this is going to be exciting. The hymns of the Rig Veda are neither the productions of a single hand, nor do they probably belong to any single age. They were composed probably at different periods by different sages, and it is not improbable that some of them were composed before the Aryan people entered the plains of India. They were handed down from mouth to mouth and gradually swelled through the new additions that were made by the poets of succeeding generations. It was when the collection had increased to a very considerable extent that it was probably arranged in the present form or in some other previous forms to which the present arrangement owes its origin. Yes, this part actually I was the only Swamiji Maharaj I follow in the world is Swami Samarpanananda on YouTube because of his videos on Rig Veda. Okay, it's in Bengali. Those who want to check it out, you can check it out. It's a playlist of 42 videos of about 1 hour each, just discussing the Rig Veda. Okay. So he was saying that the only reason it started to be written down was because the volume had grown so much of the Rig Veda that people could not remember them anymore. Even that was compiled by Veda Vyasa according to Swami Samarpanananda. But yes, इतना और लोग मगअप कर नहीं पा रहे थे इसलिए लिखना पड़ा. Okay. They were handed down from mouth to mouth. Succeeding generations swelled through the new editions that were made by the poets of succeeding generations. It was when the collection had increased to a very considerable extent that it was probably arranged in the present form, or in some other previous forms to which the present arrangement owes its origin. They therefore reflect the civilization of the Aryan people at different periods of antiquity, before and after they came to India. This unique monument of a long vanished age is of great aesthetic value and contains much that is genuine poetry. It enables us to. Okay, they are obviously believing in Aryan migration or invasion theory, but I don't know where in the world has it happened that a culture simply migrates to a place with some books and philosophy, and the rest of the land falls behind that particular philosophy without any force, because there was no force, that much is guaranteed. Okay, so that is why I think migration might not have happened, and even if it happened, it happened from pretty close by, not from far off land. It enables us to get an estimate of the primitive society which produced it, the oldest book of the Aryan race. The principal means of sustenance were cattle keeping and the cultivation of the soil with plough and harrow, mattock and hoe, and watering the ground when necessary with artificial canals. Sounds like Harappa. Kegi says, the chief food consists, together with bread of various preparations of milk, cakes of flour and butter, many sorts of vegetables and fruits, meat cooked on the spits or in pots, is little used and was probably eaten only at the great feasts and family gatherings. Sounds very Harappan. Drinking plays throughout a much more important part than eating. The woodworker built war chariots and wagons, as also more delicate carved works and artistic cups. Metal workers, smiths and potters continued their trade. The women understood the plaiting of mats, weaving and sewing. They manufactured the wool of the sheep into clothing for men and covering for animals. Okay. Now this seems like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Kashmir regions, right? Otherwise, why would they need woolen clothes? Okay. So, thand ki to baat hai. The group of individuals forming a tribe was the highest political unit. Each of the different families forming a tribe was under the sway of the father or the head of the family. Kingship was probably hereditary and in some cases electoral. 7-8,000 saal pehle electoral. Kingship was nowhere absolute, but limited by the will of the people. Look at this sentence. This is Kegi saying. Kingship was nowhere absolute in Vedic Aryans, but limited by the will of the people. Most developed ideas of justice, right, and law were present in the country. Thus, Kegi says, the hymns strongly prove how deeply the prominent minds in the people were persuaded that the eternal ordinances of the rulers of the world were as inviolable in mental and moral matters as in the realm of nature, and that every wrong act, even the unconscious, was punished and the sin expiated. Thus, it is only right. Actually, this is even actually Jordan Peterson says this based on his Christian learnings, that no one ever gets away with anything. That's kind of what's said in the Vedas as well. कि क्या ठीक है क्या गलत है, रूलिंग करने का क्या wisdom है, क्या ठीक है as a ruler, all that's as inviolable as nature itself, as the laws of nature itself. So जो गलती करोगे, unconscious हो तो भी, it will be punished and the sin will be expiated. That's pretty strong. Thus, it is only right and proper to think that the Aryans had attained a pretty high degree of civilization, but nowhere was the sincere spirit of the Aryans more manifested than in religion, which was the most essential and dominant feature of almost all the hymns except a few secular ones. Thus, Kegi says, the whole significance of the Rig Veda in reference to the general history of religion, as has repeatedly been pointed out in modern times, rests upon this, that it presents to us the development of religious conceptions from the earliest beginnings to the deepest apprehension of the Godhead and its relation to man. Interest, so amazing. Okay, let's check out some comments. Okay, Afin is saying that is what I was saying. Well, okay. Shaivas have their own agamas and tantric texts. They primarily use Shaiva Puranas like Linga, Skanda, etc. Skanda. But even Shaiva Purans are not held up like Vaishnava will hold Srimad Bhagavat Puran that they do. Yeah. Karnataka is the only region which has direct institutions of all three Vedanta Darshanikas: Sringeri Shankaramatha, Yadugiri Yatiraja Matha of Ramanuja, and Ashtamathas by Madhva. Karnataka is special. Yes, अरे Islamic invasion नहीं हुआ ना, तुम लोग मजे में हो. Although Tipu did come, but Tipu was just one guy, right? And I want to tell you, none of the traditional acharyas agree with academic views on Vedas and Vedic civilization. Vedas are said to be eternal, no origin. Fixing a period is not agreed by acharyas. Yes, they are saying that. I read in the introductory sections of my Bengali Rig Veda as well that their idea is that no one exactly composed Rig Veda. Even the sages, Vishwamitra's son Madhuchanda, the people Bharadwaja, all these people who are so-called, it's their names are on the beginning, on the top of the Shuktas, but even they themselves are supposed to have said that it's not we who are composing it. We are not thinking of these things. We are not writing them down. Someone or the other is definitely writing them down, but these truths and these conceptions were in the ether forever. We meditated on them and therefore stumbled upon them. No one told them to us exactly, but we attained those truths by long and hard meditation and concentration. And I don't think that's a very unscientific thing to believe. If we sit down and think, we reach many conclusions which are actually right. And that is how Rig Veda was composed theoretically, according to me. And someone, it is their humility in saying that no one composed it, God composed it. Yes, if God is the supreme consciousness, then definitely that supreme consciousness composed it, these truths and these concepts. But someone had to reach those places. Someone had to think, meditate hard, and reach those same conclusions and find and shine the light on those conclusions or the concepts created by that supreme consciousness, right? And that is the credit of those sages, I would say. And someday, some particular time of some particular snapshot in time, they reach those conclusions on one fine morning, maybe one fine evening, while meditating. But that does not mean they composed it. They are saying that we did not compose it. It was composed already. We just stumbled upon that composition. But what we mean by composition today is, when did they stumble upon that composition? Not when did they compose it per se. So that's the difference. By the way, okay, a lot of comments again. Ifin is saying, by the way, Samaroa Danada doesn't really teach the Rig Veda. He just goes through, say, how a book by Hawking, Sagan, etc. talks about cosmology. Okay, who is that? I'd never heard of him. Every Shukta of the Vedas has three important parts: Rishi, Chandas, and Devta. Devta is the one being extolled, Chandas the meter, okay, and Rishi is the one to whom the Shukta was revealed. Yeah, Vedas were revelations. Yeah, in a way they were revelations, but no one was coming and speaking to them, although they do claim that, but you can understand what they meant, that they essentially stumbled upon these ideas. Ifin is saying, so it is up to us to act like a bridge between the actual sampradayas and with the secular scholarship. Yes. Tattva Bodhaka is saying, Vedas are Anadi and Ananta, according to all Vedanta Acharyas. Yes. Letters, that is Varna, and sounds emanating from them, Shabda, are not produced but eternal according to all Vedanta schools. This is counterintuitive. There is a one-to-one mapping between the Varnas and Shabda, say the Vedantists. So however I pronounce any Shabda, its corresponding Varna is same. Yeah, but pronunciation has to be perfect. Otherwise, even wrong affects what you didn't want. Even those things can come true. Okay, the Vedic gods. The hymns of the Rig Veda were almost all composed in praise of the gods. Let me take a sip of coffee. We'll do it till 3 a.m. The Vedic gods. The hymns of the Rig Veda were almost all composed in praise of the gods. The social and other materials are of secondary importance, as these references had only to be mentioned incidentally in giving vent to their feelings of devotion to the god. The gods here are, however, personalities presiding over the diverse powers of nature or forming their very essence. They have therefore no definite, systematic, and separate character like the Greek gods or the gods of the later Indian mythical works, the Puranas. The powers of nature, such as the storm, the rain, the thunder, are closely associated with one another, and the gods associated with them are also similar in character. The same epithets are attributed to different gods, and it is only in a few specific qualities that they differ from one another. In the later mythological compositions of the Puranas, the gods lost their character as hypostatic powers of nature and thus became actual personalities and characters having their tales of joy and sorrow, like the mortal here below. Okay, this is a very important sentence. How does the concept of a deity or a particular god as a person come about? Okay, in the later mythological compositions of the Puranas, the gods lost their character as hypostatic powers of nature and instead become actual personalities and characters having their tales of joy and sorrow, like the mortal here below. The Vedic gods may be contrasted with them in this, that they are of an impersonal nature, as the characters they display are mostly but expressions of the powers of nature. To take an example, the fire or Agni is described, as Kaigi has it, as one that, quote, lies concealed in the softer wood as in a chamber, until called forth by the rubbing in the early morning hour, he suddenly springs forth in gleaming brightness. The sacrificer takes and lays him on the wood. When the priests pour melted butter upon him, he leaps up, crackling and neighing like a horse, he whom men love to see increasing like their own prosperity. They wonder at him, decking himself with changing colors like a suitor, equally beautiful on all sides. He presents to all sides his front. This chapter is called Polytheism, Henotheism and Monotheism. Okay, that's the next subchapter. Okay, this sentence needs to be read once again. This was pretty complex according to me. The Vedic gods may be contrasted with them in this. This was, we discussed the paper on the evolution of Vedic Rudra to Shiva of the Mahabharata, right? This is the transition that now Surendranath Dasgupta is describing. The Vedic gods may be contrasted with the Puranic gods in this way, that the Vedic gods are of an impersonal nature. They are a concept, as the characters they display are mostly but expressions of the powers of nature. Yeah. To take an example, the fire or Agni is described as one that lies concealed in the softer wood. Okay, so fire or Agni is concealed in the softer wood as in a chamber until someone calls forth by rubbing in the early morning hour. He suddenly springs forth, the fire suddenly comes out in gleaming brightness. The sacrificer takes and lays him on the wood. When the priests pour melted butter upon him, he leaps up, crackling and neighing like a horse. The fire is now lighted upon the wood. He whom men love to see increasing like their own prosperity. So now prosperity is being compared with the fire. Men love to see fire increasing like their own prosperity. They wonder at the fire, when decking himself with changing colors like a suitor, equally beautiful on all sides, the fire. He presents to all sides his front. Okay, now we read a direct mantra from Rig Veda. All searching is his beam, the gleaming of his light. His, the all beautiful of beauteous face and glance. The changing shimmer like that flows upon the stream. So Agni's rays gleam over bright and never cease. They would describe the wind, Vata, and adore him and say, another mantra from Rig Veda, in what place was he born, and from whence comes he? The vital breath of gods. Okay, this sentence is pretty popular in our modern parlance as well, right? हम कहाँ से आए थे, कहाँ जाएंगे? In what place was he born, and from whence comes he? The vital breath of gods, the world's great offspring. The god, wherever he will, moves at his pleasure. His rushing sound we hear. What his appearance? No one. That is now we are talking about air here. And in the Bengali Rig Veda, I read that that was Swami Samarpanananda saying in his explanation of the Rig Veda in Bengali, that all the basic elements, that fire, water, air, etc., there is a particular order of priority or some sort of ranking or chronology. Some come after the previous, and those who come after the previous, they have their own characteristics and also the characteristics of the previous element. For example, he was saying that sky has the akasha has the characteristic of sound because there are thunders and all, and air you can feel. So air comes after sky, and air has therefore sound and you can feel it. Next comes fire. Fire you can see, feel and hear. And then comes something soil or something like that. I don't remember. Okay. Let me check some comments. Tattva Bodhaka is saying Vedas are Anadi and Ananta according to all Vedanta Acharyas. Letters one. Okay. There is a one-to-one mapping. Yeah, this I read. Vedas were like resonance. When rishis turned it into right frequency, nature revealed the Shukta to the rishi. Yes, and from a sound engineering perspective, I think it can work. But yes, it requires meditation, and then they stumble upon this after a lot of thinking. Nihilist Trader, is my comment visible? Yeah, it's visible. Sanskrit term to describe this revelation is Spurna, I guess. Okay. Tattva is saying, again, Vedanta Acharyas don't agree with this Vedic God, Puranic God differentiations. Yes. What if I told you the Puranas and Itihasas are mentioned in the Vedas, Chandogya Upanishad? Okay. The description of Agni which you read now is exactly what is called literal translation. Not all description in the Vedas are impersonal, Anna. Purusha Shukta has a very personal yet metaphorical description of the Purusha. Okay. We'll get to them hopefully. Okay, now Surendranath Dasgupta writes, it was the forces of nature and her manifestations on earth. The forces of nature and the manifestations on earth here, the atmosphere around and above us, or in the heaven beyond the vault of the sky, that excited the devotion and imagination of the Vedic poets. Thus, with the exception of a few abstract gods of whom we shall presently speak and some dual divinities, the gods may be roughly classified as the terrestrial, atmospheric and celestial. Okay, three classifications of gods. Terrestrial gods, atmospheric gods and celestial gods. Nice. Taking a sip of coffee. Okay. Now a subchapter begins. We have 15 more minutes to go. आज बहुत हो गया. We read a lot already. Polytheism, henotheism and monotheism. I have never heard the word henotheism. The plurality of the Vedic gods may lead a superficial inquirer, जो कि ऊपर ऊपर सोच रहा है, superficial inquirer to think the faith of the Vedic people polytheistic. But an intelligent reader will find here neither polytheism nor monotheism, but a simple primitive stage of belief to which both of these may be said to owe their origin. Okay. The gods here do not preserve their proper places as in a polytheistic faith, but each one of them shrinks into insignificance or shrines as supreme according as it is the object of adoration or not. What? Each one of them shrinks into insignificance or shrines. Okay. It's not shrines, it's shrines. Okay. Now I understood. The gods here in the Vedas do not preserve their proper places as in a polytheistic faith, but each one of them shrinks into either insignificance or ends up shining as supreme according as it is the object of adoration or not. Okay. जब adoration है तब it shines, and if it's not adored then it becomes insignificant. The Vedic poets were the children of nature. Every natural phenomenon excited their wonder, admiration or veneration. The poet is struck with wonder that quote, the rough red cow gives soft white milk, end quote. The appearance, okay, so this is a pretty philosophical poetic thought there. एक लाल गाय से सफेद दूध निकल रहा है. That's so fascinating. This is true philosophy. The appearance or the setting of the sun sends a thrill into the minds of the Vedic sage, and with wonder-gazing eyes, he exclaims, okay, another mantra from Rigveda, undropped beneath, not fastened firm. How comes it? Undropped beneath, not fastened firm. That downward turned, he falls not downward. The guide of his ascending path, who saw it? The sages wonder how, quote, the sparkling waters of all rivers flow into one ocean without ever filling it. This is so amazing, and basically gives you the map of the Vedic civilization. They were sewing woolen clothes, so it has to be around the hills of Afghanistan, maybe Pakistan, Swat Valley, Kashmir, and all the way down to the sea. Sea कहाँ है? सिर्फ गुजरात पाकिस्तान में. So Gulf, etc., or the Run of Kutch, those regions, all that was Vedic civilization, I think. The sages wonder how the sparkling waters of all rivers flow into one ocean without ever filling it. The minds of the Vedic people, as we find in the hymns, were highly impressionable and fresh. At this stage, the time was not ripe enough for them to accord a consistent and well-defined existence to the multitude of gods, nor to universalize them in a monotheistic creed. They hypostatized unconsciously any force of nature that overawed them or filled them with gratefulness and joy by its beneficent or aesthetic character, and adored it. This is a beautiful way of looking at it. The deity which moved the devotion or admiration of their mind, was the most supreme for the time. This particular trait of the Vedic hymns Max Muller has called henotheism or kathenotheism. Okay, it means a belief in single gods, each in turn standing out as the highest, and since the gods are thought of as specially ruling in their own spheres, the singers in their special concerns and desires call most of all on that god to whom they ascribe the most power in the matter. Okay, yeah. To whose department, if I may say so, their wish belongs. Right. तो अगर मुझे एक फ़ोन चाहिए, I think of a phone god, maybe that way. This god alone is present to the mind of the okay, so this is not polytheism. This I didn't know. Did you guys know? This is different from polytheism. हर चीज़ के लिए एक different god is not the same as polytheism. Polytheism meaning all gods are equally important or something like that, I guess. This god alone is present to the mind of the suppliant. With him for the time being is associated everything that can be said of a divine being. He is the highest, the only god before whom all others disappear. There being in this, however, no offense or depreciation of any other god. It does not mean that the other gods are being disrespected. Against this theory it has been urged, as MacDonald rightly says in his Vedic mythology, against this theory it has been urged that Vedic deities are not represented as independent of all the rest. Since no religion brings its gods into more frequent and varied juxtaposition and combination, and that even the mightiest gods of the Veda are made dependent on others. Thus, Varuna and Surya are subordinate to Indra, Varuna, and the Ashwins. Thus, Varuna and Surya are subordinate to Indra. Varuna and the Ashwins submit to the power of Vishnu. Even when a god is spoken of as unique or chief, Eka, as is natural enough in laudations, such statements lose their temporarily monotheistic force through the modifications or corrections supplied by the context or even by the same verse. So henotheism is therefore an appearance rather than a reality, an appearance produced by the indefiniteness due to undeveloped anthropomorphism meaning that हर चीज़ को एक इंसान के तरह compare करना. So henotheism is therefore an appearance rather than a reality, an appearance produced by the indefiniteness due to undeveloped anthropomorphism, by the lack of any Vedic god occupying the position of a Zeus as the constant head of the pantheon, by the natural tendency of the priest or singer in extolling a particular god to exaggerate his greatness and to ignore other gods, and by the growing belief in the unity of the gods, each of whom might be regarded as a type of the divine. But whether we call it henotheism or the mere temporary exaggeration of the powers of the deity in question, it is evident that this stage can neither be properly called polytheistic nor monotheistic, but one which had a tendency towards them both, although it was not sufficiently developed to be identified with either of them. The tendency towards extreme exaggeration could be called a monotheistic bias in germ, whereas the bias in germ meaning there's a little germ of monotheism we can see in this extreme exaggeration. The tendency towards extreme exaggeration could be called a monotheistic bias in germ, whereas the correlation of different deities as independent of one another and yet existing side by side was a tendency towards polytheism. Yes, so it was kind of monotheistic in some contexts and polytheistic in some contexts. So this is the end of a subchapter. Let's see if we will begin another subchapter, because only 5 minutes left. No, so we'll do this next day. By then I hope my book will arrive, for which Abhinag has donated. Thanks a lot, Abhi. I think he's probably gone offline by now. Shit. Okay, let me read some comments once again. So many comments. Not all description in Vedas are impersonal. Okay. Yes, definitely the Vedic verses he read on vital force is about prana. Akshat Vayu, Vayor, Agni, Apat, Apyat Prithvi. Draw how his word is similar to prana. We might have influenced them ironically. By the way, breath of gods. You'll be fascinated to know that in the oldest version of the Bible, the Greek one, it is called pneuma, which is replaced in the English language as Holy Spirit. But I'd like to draw his word is similar to prana. We might have influenced them ironically. Yeah. Yes, definitely the Vedic verses he read on vital forces about prana. Henotheism, one supreme god, all other demigods under his control. Okay. Antarikshe pathibhir yamano nani vishate katamach chanaha apam sakha prathamaja ritava kavasvij jata kutaha babhuva. These Western terms are misleading. So when they say monotheism, they mean existence of only one god. Now when we say Parabrahman of Vedas, it doesn't translate to God. Yes, English translations are misleading. That is one of the main problems. Okay, we still have 5 minutes. Let's do this subchapter. Growth of a monotheistic tendency. Prajapati Vishwakarma. Okay, no. This is a transition to a different. Okay, no, we can do this. Growth of a monotheistic tendency in Rigveda. This tendency towards extolling a god as the greatest and highest gradually brought forth the conception of a supreme lord of all beings, Prajapati, not by a process of conscious generalization, but as a necessary stage of development of the mind. So, ongoing evolution चल रहा है, तो उसके वजह से ये हुआ. Necessary stage of development of the mind, able to imagine a deity as the repository of the highest moral and physical power, though its direct manifestation cannot be perceived. Thus, the epithet Prajapati, or the Lord of Beings, which was originally an epithet for other deities, came to be recognized as a separate deity, the highest and the greatest. Thus it is said. Oh, I thought this is a citation. This is an entire mantra from Rigveda. I have to read this once more. Thus the epithet of Prajapati, or the Lord of Beings, which was originally an epithet for other deities. Okay, so Prajapati used to be the word for other deities. Then it became Prajapati himself is the chief Lord of Beings. Came to be recognized as a separate deity altogether, the highest and the greatest. Thus it is said in Rigveda, in the beginning rose Hiranyagarbha, born as the only Lord of all existence. This earth he settled firm and heaven established. What god shall we adore with our oblations? Who gives us breath? Who gives us strength? Whose bidding all creatures must obey, the bright gods even. Whose shade is death, whose shadow life is immortal. What god shall we adore with our oblations? Who by his might alone became the monarch of all that breathes, of all that wakes or slumbers, of all both man and beast, the Lord eternal. What god shall we adore with our oblations? Whose might and majesty these snowy... Okay, I was reading this wrong. Okay, I'll have to read this once more so that I can get to the meaning properly. I was reading it wrong. Now I've understood. In the beginning rose Hiranyagarbha, born as the only Lord of all existence. This earth he settled firm and heaven established. Now, what god shall we adore with our oblations? Kaunsa god? Wo god who gives us breath, who gives us strength, whose bidding all creatures must obey, the bright gods even, whose shade is death, whose shadow life is immortal. What god shall we adore with our oblations? Who by his might alone became the monarch of all that breathes, monarch of all that breathes, of all that wakes or slumbers, of all, both man and beast, the Lord eternal. What God shall we adore with our oblations? Whose might and majesty these snowy mountains, Afghanistan, Swat Valley से अलग कहाँ पे होगा, और नहीं तो कश्मीर. This has to be in those regions. Whose might and majesty these snowy mountains, the ocean and the distant stream exhibit, whose arms extended are these spreading regions. What God shall we adore with our oblations? Who made the heavens bright, the earth enduring, who fixed the firmament, the heaven of heavens, who measured out the air's extended spaces. This is great thinking. All humility. Who fixed the firmament, the heaven of heavens, measured out the air's extended spaces. What God shall we adore with our oblations? Similar attributes are also ascribed to the deity Vishwakarma, all creator. He is said to be father and procreator of all beings, though himself uncreated. Ah, what a beautiful sentence. What a complex sentence. Complex concept. He is said to be the father and procreator of all beings, though himself uncreated. He generated the primitive waters. It is to him that the sage says, who is our father, our creator, maker, who every place both know, who every place doth know. Okay, this is not a question, this is an answer, this is a sentence, a statement. Who is our father, our creator, maker, who every place doth know and every creature, by whom alone to gods their names were given, by whom alone to gods their names were given, to him all other creatures go to ask him, to him all other creatures go to ask him. Okay, so many people are online, 12 people are online in the middle of the night. Okay, let's check out some comments. It's 3 am, I'll have to go now. Let's check out some comments again. Parabrahman is only one, which means no other Parabrahman exists, but definitely other entities that are not Parabrahman exist. Yeah. By Western definition of monotheism, Vedas can be classified as monotheistic as well, right? These biased Western descriptors cannot capture the Sanskrit words. Yes. Okay, Nihilist is saying, I recommend this paper written by Meenakshi Jain for next stream. Okay, great. I was exactly thinking about this, that we'll find out some paper from Meenakshi Jain, if we can find it in JSTOR. It's called Flawed Narratives, History in the NCERT Textbooks, a random survey of Satish Chandra's medieval India. It's only 56 pages. Okay. Post the link in the comment section of this video after we are done with the stream. Okay. The mantra you are reading is Hiranya Garbha Shuchaya. Okay. So Nihilist, did you find this in JSTOR or wherever you have found this? Post the link here. So that's it, guys. Thanks a lot for this, for joining this. And so now tell me, will we do a paper on Wednesday night, or we will do history of Indian philosophy? I think we should do history of Indian philosophy only, because this is pretty deep. और अगर हम Thursday paper चालू करते हैं मीनाक्षी जैन जी का Thursday night को, तो that might not end on Thursday, right? So we will take it up on the next Thursday. In 2 days we will do it. But let's get on with history of Indian philosophy 2 days in the week. That is on Wednesday nights and Friday nights. And tomorrow night we are doing Arthashastra, okay? Oh, by the way, Prajapati also refers to Brahma. Yeah, Prajapati is Brahma. Prajapati Brahma. Okay. So stopping the stream now, guys. Good night.